Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the live stream. We've got 17 in the room already. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Please let me know where you're coming from. Yeah, we see Len is in the room. Len, welcome. Welcome today. Guys, there's 18 in the room. Let me know where you're coming from. Give a shout out. Aaron, always good to see you, my friend. No, I don't know Itzhak Bentov. I don't know, Aaron. Sorry, but good night, good evening in Texas. It's morning time here in Australia. So I started 1 hour earlier today, people. So I just wanted to see if any of the European audience would actually pop in. I know it's still a bit late in Europe, but I thought I'd start 1 hour earlier. There's 16 in the room, 18 in the room, only 13 thumbs up. Give a thumbs up if you're just coming in, and let me know where you're coming from. And we'll get these questions started, yeah? So today in Australia, sunny day, beautiful day in Brisbane, Australia today. Beautiful morning. Len, it's only midnight in UK. Len, you were on so late last time. Good to see you. And Len, thank you. Thank you for staying up so late. I appreciate it, my friend. Sorry I can't do it earlier. Maybe in the future. Cameron. Cameron, thank you. Good to see you again. Dazzling Chick, good to see you. Yes, Lehman. Luther. Thank you, Luther. How was Ohio, Luther? Ohio was good. Nigeria, Lehman. Nigeria. What time in the morning is it in Nigeria? Must be very early. Sterling, Melbourne. Cold and windy. Yes, I know Sterling. I used to live in, I think I told you last time, I used to live in Melbourne from 2000 to 2004. And for myself, coming from North Queensland, born and raised in North Queensland, and moving to Melbourne was a bit of an eye-opener at a very young age. So working in the cold and so forth. Linda. Good to have you, Linda. Hope it's a good day in the USA, wherever you are. Miss Sen, always good to see you, Miss Sen. Thank you for being on every live stream. I hope Montreal is good today. Finn, you're the best, Finn. Awesome, man. Midnight in UK, I got you this time. Sometimes it's a bit late for you, yeah, Finn? Sometimes. Insalubrious, always good to see you, my friend. How are you today? Maximus, first time live streamer, long time watcher of your channel. Maximus, thank you. Thank you. It's always good. You know, a lot of people on my channel actually say that they've been watching my channel for a long time, but the nature of people like us, we're not usually like, I guess, you know, YouTube commenters, and, you know, like on a lot of other channels, people are all, you know, they get emotional, but I guess the videos are too emotional as well for some people. But on my channel, usually people will email me and say they've watched my channel for a long time. So it's good to see you, Maximus, for the first time. Yeah. Lehman, it's midnight, 12:05. Okay, in Nigeria. All right. CB, yeah, buddy. Looking fresh. Thank you, my friend. Peso Amiga, Texas. Welcome. Love Texas. Ahmed, hello, bro. Shanti from Morocco. Ahmed, Morocco. Wow. Must be really early in the morning as well. Probably same as or close time to Nigeria, I guess. JC, New Mexico. Thank you. Love your videos. Thank you, JC. Finn, nice to do it an hour earlier there. Thank you, Finn. Well, that's what I thought. I thought if I can do it an hour earlier, I will capture some of you guys in Europe, and well, I got a few from Africa in here, but it must be really early as well. Similar time for sure. Danny, thank you, Danny. Thank you for being here, Danny Roman. Finn, yes, thank you, Finn. Christian Island, thank you. Island in the house, love it. Sterling, it's so funny when people come from wherever expecting Australia to be how it is in North Queensland, in Melbourne. My wife, originally from Japan, spent time in Bundy before coming to Melbourne. For those who don't know, Bundy is a kind of a Aussie slang term for Bundaberg. So just north of where I live, so very warm. It's winter here in Brisbane, for those who don't know, and it's not very cold. I'm still here in a t-shirt, and I guess living in Melbourne when I was a bit younger helped me out on that one. James, Arizona, in the house. Thank you, sir. Yogi Ness, Ottawa. Oh, love it. Love it. Lane, Alabama. Oh, man, we got a good mix in here. Sinead, Ireland. Miss Zen, I just finished your book, Fasting the Mind. What a beautiful work. I have already ordered The Science and Practice of Humility. Miss Zen, thank you. I'm so glad you enjoyed Fasting the Mind, yeah. It really means a lot. You will like the Science and Practice of Humility too, trust me. Chris Tracy, Melbourne, listening at work. Chris, thank you. Thank you. I hope you're having a good day at work today. Michael McKinney. Michael, namaskar, brother. Last time, I remember. St. Louis, yes. William, Pennsylvania. Yes, I love Pennsylvania. William, I spent some time in Pennsylvania. I probably told you that on a live stream previously. I have some good friends in Pennsylvania, a lot of good friends actually. And ironically, I spent time in Philadelphia and then spent some time. My friend actually lives in a really small town called Morgantown. I don't know if you know the place, but it's really in the middle of nowhere. So that's kind of like south of Harrisburg or somewhere along those lines, if I can spit it out. Guys, 34 in the room, only 24 thumbs up. Give us a thumbs up. All right, let's get the questions cranking, yeah? Let's get some questions cranking and we'll Emmanuel. Ghana. Oh, man. Thank you, Emmanuel. I'm really glad you finally got a chance to catch the live stream. I know it would be probably better if I wake up at probably 5 and do this at 6 in the morning for I guess in general for the whole world, or maybe if I do it at midnight. But I know a lot of you work and stuff like that, so it's probably, it's going to be too late for me and probably problematic for everyone to join the live stream. Grizzly Adams, always. Thank you, my friend. Arkansas in the house. Love it. Sunny day in Arkansas, I'm assuming, or a wet day maybe. People, there's 43 in the house, 30 thumbs up. There should be, we should be getting up to around 50 thumbs up by now. Let's get to that 100 thumbs up in this stream. Okay. Any questions you have today? Or we just, Michael McKinney, sunny day. So good. Sunny day in St. Louis. Beautiful day here in Brisbane. It's one of those days you want to just go for a long walk, but I'd prefer to talk to you guys. So Ham Radio Fun. Sean from Macclesfield, 30 kilometers south of Manchester United in the UK. Yes. Newly subscribed and new to all this. Ham, thank you for being with us. Awesome, man. Thank you for subscribing. Kura, Aituaroa, thank you. Kia ora, my friend. How are you? Good to have New Zealand in the house as well. Let's get the questions rolling, people. Let's get it. Bonsoir from Bonjour from Acadian Forest. Charles, thank you for being with us. Christian, in your opinion, from your studies, what do we all seek in the life? In short, what is the ultimate desire we all seek? Opinion. Yes, in your opinion. Oh, okay, I got you. Well, it's interesting because, like we talk about desires in Eastern spirituality especially, and Lao Tzu has a really good way of talking about this, where he has the desires of the eye and the desires of the belly. The desires of the eye are those artificial desires that society creates, Christian, and the desires of the belly are those natural desires that we have, like obviously for food, shelter, love, clothing, connection with people. And also coupled in that is a spiritual desire for liberation. And so even in Buddhism, they talk about this. I don't know if you know the word bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is like the effort that you put into your spiritual practice and cultivation to attain a liberation, or, in Buddhist terms, nirvana. So blowing the candle out. So you have to have a sort of like a healthy desire for that spiritual liberation, to free yourself from the hypnosis of this accumulative sense of self that we have become, right? This identity. So that in itself is a healthy desire and a natural desire, as Lao Tzu would say, as opposed to a desire that, I desire this car, or I desire to have 5 houses, and, I desire to be famous and have status and, wealth, etc. Not that there's anything wrong with those if they are a natural byproduct of time, but if your direction in life is to seek status and fame and wealth, then that will obviously inhibit your spiritual practice. So, in short, in Eastern spirituality, they are liberation traditions, right? So it's different than, so in the Abrahamic faiths, right, it's based on salvation, right? So, but in Eastern spirituality, it's about individual liberation, meaning liberation from the identity that the world has kind of created for you, this ego that we've become, right? It's not, and in saying that, it's not that you will lose your egoic interface with life, right? You'll keep that, but it's in a much more refined manner, and it's in a manner where you don't have a firm belief in your identity, if that makes sense, right? You don't have a firm belief in your identity, and it's not going to possess you, and you're not going to act and react emotionally out of that conditioned identity. If that makes sense, Christian. There's a lot to go in there for sure, but let's have a look. Sterling, still super intrigued about your experiences within the martial arts. What type of training did you do in the past, and could you touch on the crossover between martial arts and spirituality? Well, there's a big crossover, Sterling. It depends on if you're talking about spiritually oriented martial arts or combat oriented martial arts. I know I'm splitting hairs here and trying to define what you're saying, but I'm assuming you mean spiritually oriented martial arts like Tai Chi Chuan, Qigong, which I have practiced. Qigong I've practiced for longer periods of time than Tai Chi Chuan, because, well, as all of you know, I've had a lot of spiritual training in different traditions, and so one of my main spiritual practices is just traditional sitting meditation, usually with Qigong. Also, I have practiced Hatha Yoga. But I haven't practiced Tai Chi Chuan for a little while. Not that I won't come back, because you always seem to come back to Tai Chi Chuan. But the crossover is basically, I don't know if you know much about the spiritually oriented martial arts, Sterling, but some of the idea with Tai Chi Chuan, Qigong, even Hatha Yoga, is that you're trying to balance out the 2 hemispheres of your mind, and trying to, if we look at from cognitive science, you're trying to have like embodied cognition, with the cold cognition, which is kind of this frontal lobe, which is the analytical part of your functioning of your mind, as opposed to the unconscious regions that we don't need to think about. I can do this, right? We can speak effortlessly without having to overly think about it. Usually when we overly think about it, we start to, give ourselves a bit of an obstacle to overcome. So the martial arts training will allow you to have sort of like an embodied cognition, where you kind of, in some sense, are cultivating a sense of wu-wei, of effortless action or effortless living, or acting, immediately and appropriately to each and every situation. This is the point of martial arts training, and it's always in a lot of the text and even a lot of the stories you hear in the traditions. So, for example, there's the old Japanese fencing story, Sterling, where the Japanese fencer goes, an aspiring Japanese fencer goes to see a master in Japan, and they want to learn Japanese fencing, and the master says, "Yeah, that's all well and good, but you begin on the dishes, yeah." So the student is washing the dishes every day, and the master comes along and then cracks him in the shoulder, and he's like, oh damn, like, you know what I mean? And then the next day he comes along and he cracks him on the butt. And then so every day then the student begins to think about a defense, about how can I defend the master's attack. So you'll think, oh, I'm pretty sure he's going to come here, and then he hits him in the gut, right? And so what this does is allows the student eventually, after months and months and months of this, to let go and to feel the moment. I know that it's a story, right? You don't want to over exaggerate this, but he begins to feel the moment. So when the master comes along again, he is ready for whatever presents itself. This is kind of like a metaphor for martial arts training, and also Zen training, actually, because in Zen training, when we look at the Koan tradition and Zen, you're trying to cultivate a spontaneous attitude or natural attitude or behavior where we are acting immediately and appropriately to each and every situation. And so in martial arts, when you're in martial arts training, if you're practicing pushing hands, or even if you're in combat-oriented martial arts, you're training yourself to act immediately and appropriately to each and every situation. Now, I know a lot of, like, for example, MMA athletes and this and that probably wouldn't even know about this sort of knowledge, but they do. I guess they would train in some sort of conflict resolution, but not to the degree of probably what we are talking about here, from the Taoist point of view of Wu Wei, which we can translate in this sense as intelligent spontaneity. So reacting intelligently with spontaneity. So it's interesting because when we look at the Eastern traditions, in a lot of the texts, as I mentioned, a lot of the obstacles that we encounter as humans is that we don't, our nature has been warped, right? So the whole game is to rediscover our nature again, which is kind of strange, right? But and so that's where we have like a split between Confucius and Lao Tzu and how to do that, and so forth and so on. So I hope that kind of answers your question a little bit. That's such a vast topic. Guys, 49 in the room, only 42 thumbs up. Let's get it to 100. Brad, thank you. I enjoy reading your comments, Brad. Thank you very much. Brad Chappell. Lehman, isn't it somehow oxymoronic to teach people about the Tao, considering Lao Tzu said, those who know don't talk? Lehman, it is interesting that when we read some of the translations, they say that, but it's interesting when we actually read the Chinese and we read proper translations. Like, a lot of people will say that, right, from reading Stephen Mitchell's interpretation. It's not a translation. I love Stephen Mitchell's interpretation, but it's not a proper translation, right? So in the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu is talking about, it's kind of ironic in a sense, even with Lao Tzu, where he says, if you look at it from that perspective, those who don't talk, blah, 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 don't know the Tao. But then he goes on to write 81 small chapters, right? But the difference is that he's talking about linguistic frameworks. And also, if you look at proper translations, there's a way of translating it as knowledge and smartness, right? So what he means by knowledge and smartness is in the sense of people who are schooled in the Confucian school, because we need to remember that Taoism, in its historical context, was a critique of Confucianism. Even though, look, yes, we can apply it to any form of socialization, even in the modern day. That's why you guys a lot of you guys are on the channel, right? But in its historical context, he's targeting it at Confucians. So knowledge and smartness here, or those who speak too much, is in reference to those who are schooled in the rules and regulations of Confucianism. So he's not essentially talking about, he knows that we need to speak about the Tao because language is a part of our life, but we don't want to get caught in the linguistic framework. That's the difference. So it's not oxymoronic. It's only oxymoronic if you see it too analytically, and that can be a problem from the Western cognitive style. Whereas this conversation never happens in the East. I always find it ironic because when I discuss Taoism with Chinese or Indians or Southeast Asians especially, I don't ever come across this question. I only come across it from people probably outside of that sort of Asiatic region, where people will say, isn't it oxymoronic to talk about the Tao? When Lao Tzu said, don't talk about that. You don't know if you don't talk about the Tao. And it's like, well, that's not an actual proper translation. But also, you don't want to make that something like an analytical game of spiritual one-upsmanship. So, and also Lao Tzu would say it's kind of stupid if you don't talk about it in some sense, because he's not saying that you should never, ever talk about it. You have to talk about it because language is a part of our life. But it's if you get caught up in the meaning, right? If you make it an object. See, the problem is, one of the main problems with this is making it an object of knowledge. So in the Upanishads, there's a classic phrase: those who know the Brahman don't know the Brahman. Those who do not know the Brahman know the Brahman. Now, what this means, Brahman here, ultimate reality being similar to the concept of Tao, is that when you make it an object of knowledge, so it's an object, then you've missed the point. It's not a living thing. It's not. You've almost made it into you've made it into an object basically. And so, same as with the Tao, we can make it an object of knowledge rather than a living thing that we live in, that we feel in our life. But conversing about it is important. And I know I get a lot of comments with people who are interested in like playing games with me because they feel inadequate. No, I'm not saying you're one, Lehman, but I get a lot of ones that are who get aggressive, like, oh, you mentioned the Tao, so you don't know the Tao. And it's like, well, you commented the way you commented, so you obviously don't know the Tao. And also, you are being rude to a stranger, which implies that you are very far from the Tao. Because if you understand the Tao, you love and appreciate all, and do not especially speak to strangers in that sort of way. So we need to speak about the Tao, and it's not oxymoronic. If you want to continue to think that way, then that's just for you. We will continue to do this, and we'll continue to have fun. Lao Tzu is just, Lao Tzu is like, we can talk about this stuff and just have fun. Yeah. We don't have to make it some sort of serious thing like some religions do in their traditions, right? Like people turn God and this and that into these really serious things, where we can speak about it in a very fluid way. So yeah, you want to think about the translations that you are reading, and also you want to think about Lao Tzu's warning. He's warning that with a linguistic framework that we superimpose onto nature, if we attach to the name and form nama rupa in Sanskrit, that's where problems occur. If you leave it as it is, but you have a framework, so you have a frame of reference for understanding the Tao at a deeper level, there's nothing wrong with that. Because in the end of the day, you need a map, but you need to remember that the map is not the territory. Aaron, your thoughts of higher planes of consciousness. How would you describe consciousness? Consciousness is a very interesting thing, isn't it, Aaron? When we look at consciousness, we would say, well, let's look at it from the Buddhist context, right? So consciousness, or let's say the mind here, they like to use the word the mind in a lot of Buddhist texts, is empty, spontaneous, and free. So consciousness itself is empty, spontaneous, and free, right? But what happens is, as it says in the Yoga Sutras, is we color consciousness. We color consciousness with the experiences we take in, and then we attach to the mental activity that has been sort of solidified in our mind from, experiencing this reality, right? Which then becomes our samskaras, our subliminal imprints, which becomes our habits, our tendencies, our vasanas, which then becomes our karma, our actions and unconscious actions. And so higher planes of consciousness, it's interesting because I speak about the three planes of consciousness in my book, The Science and Practice of Humility, where you've got the physical plane of consciousness, you've got the mental plane of consciousness, and you've got the spiritual plane of consciousness. So in the East, obviously the highest plane of consciousness is the spiritual plane of consciousness, which means, in a sense, that you are awakened, but also that your awareness is not entangled with the mental and physical states of consciousness, if that makes sense. Because if you dwell, for example, if you only dwell in the physical plane of consciousness, that means you see reality as a solid thing where you are kind of possessed by the dualistic mind, and all conflict and trouble can arise from that state of consciousness, uh, which is obviously coupled with the mental state of consciousness, right? So the spiritual plane of consciousness is this higher form of consciousness uh, that has the ability to, in some sense, see order out of chaos. Yeah. So a sage's perception, for example, has the perception to see what you and I ordinarily would think is chaos, but they see intrinsic order and harmony. And they sort of know, like, to use Zen terminology of the Zen farmer and son story, that this, what you think you see, you can't, it's hard to come to a conclusion about what it really is. You have to keep like this we'll see mentality, in that, like in the farmer son Zen story, where bad things keep happening to the son, and the village people come over to see the father and go, oh, how terrible is it? And he's like, we'll see. And then something good will happen to the son, and they say how great it is for the son, and the father says, we'll see. So like the sage has this sort of heightened sense of perception, which is related to a higher plane of consciousness. And so then when you're in that higher plane of consciousness, you are not you are not possessed by your own personal ego and its own prarabdha karma, own personal predestined karma. So you just live your life from a higher state of consciousness, and you're not drawn into the dramas of the world. Chill Dragon. Chill, great to see you. Hey, Jason, can you give an explanation of the difference between Mahayana Buddhism and Vajrayana Buddhism, commonly called Tibetan Buddhism? Thank you, my friend. Actually, Chill, to be fair, Tibetan Buddhism is a mixture of Mahayana and Vajrayana. It's not entirely Vajrayana. I know that probably it's confusing, right? Tibetan Buddhism can be confusing, but Tibetan Buddhism, in most of the paths, is a mixture of Mahayana and Vajrayana. But the differences between Mahayana and Vajrayana are more about the shamanistic traditions of Tibet. So Vajrayana is definitely influenced by the Bon tradition of Tibet. But there are a lot of similarities between Vajrayana and Mahayana. Yeah. This is a very vast topic, Chill, very vast topic. And actually, I probably should make a video on this one, because I think that it can be confusing, right? Like, because when we look at Theravada Buddhism, we can see that there's the obvious difference between Theravada Buddhism and Mahayana and Vajrayana. But then when we look at Mahayana and Vajrayana, they're very similar. But the main difference is the influence of the shamanic traditions in Tibet, which then has influenced, obviously, Tibetan Buddhism, which is a mixture of the teachings of Mahayana and Vajrayana. So there's a lot to go in there, and to explain it properly, I probably need to do an entire video. Thank you. It's a great question, Chill. Raul, hi, Jason. How are you doing? Raul, Argentina in the house. Guys, 54 in the room, only 47 thumbs up. Give us a thumbs up. What have we got here? Daniel Stewart. Dan, good to see you, my brother. Thank you. Miss Zen, I have a question about the stages of meditation. I experimented twice with a state where I had the impression that the subject and object became one, but I was a little afraid. So there was still duality. It was as if me and the universe were one and the same. It was quite strange. Could you elaborate on this subject or on the different stages or offer us more in-depth writings on the subject? Well, this is obviously this is a non-dual meditation you're talking about, Ms. Sen. And I'm really happy that you're engaged in those sorts of meditations, but they can be frightening when you have an experience of the object subject becoming one. And here, it's when the meditator dissolves into the experience, basically, right? The sense or feeling of the meditator is gone, right? So this is essential knowledge within the non-dual traditions of the dissolution of the subject-object split, right? So, and actually, according to the Advaitic or the non-dual teachings, there is no actual duality. That the idea of subject-object split is kind of a cognitive error in our mind from the accumulation of a jiva or a persona. But the more we work on our meditation practice, the more we begin to loosen this grip on this subject split, right? So then you have a very lucid, I don't want to say experience, but a lucid state of consciousness. Yeah, because saying that in experience it still implies kind of a subject is there. So the idea in most of the deeper meditation practices, Ms. Sen, is to get rid of the actual subject in the practice, right? And also to eventually not have an object of knowledge or an object in your mind. And so, and this happens through deeper and deeper practices, obviously, the more you go further into it. And look, it can be frightening for some people when they have that sort of experience, but it's something that we can all play with, right? Because nothing bad is going to happen there. I mean, no one's died from meditation. Not that I know of anyway, but so I would say dive deeper into it. Is there any in-depth writings on the subject? Well, I would say look at a book called Non-Duality by David Loy, who gets a lot into the subject-object split. And also, I would say try and read the Mandukya Kataka or the Mandukya Upanishad Kataka with Gaudapada and Shankara's commentary, which is a massive teaching, or an essential teaching, I should say, on non-duality and this idea of subject-object split. And I would even say, I know that you probably already have, but look into the work of Ramana Maharshi. So thank you for that, Ms. Sen. What have we got here? James Leon. James, thank you for being with us. What advice do you have for young people in general? Oh, what advice do I have for young people? Stay off social media. Stay off social media and get out of the habit of opinions and commentating on everything, which coincidentally has been cultivated a lot more since the advent of social media, because we can just comment at a whim on whatever someone's doing without considering the mental health of the person that someone is doing that to. And so I would say that my advice to young people is get off social media, concentrate more on meditation, and focus on actually cultivating deeper states of knowledge within yourself. I see a lot of entrepreneurs online, right, saying to young people, don't worry about knowledge, invest in tools. Okay, I understand that from a practical perspective of making money and making a living, but that is not going to give you any peace or any sort of understanding of your life, even if you had money, right? So everyone that knows me knows that we invest a lot into knowledge here. So that's what my advice would be to young people: is invest in knowledge, start meditating, and reduce your digital consumption, and read books, stop this game. Stop this game of being overly opinionated and commenting on everything online as if your opinion matters. It doesn't matter. And I know that that's humbling for a lot of people, but that's what we all need to realize. Our opinions don't matter in the end. Yeah. So get into a habit of cultivating peaceful states of consciousness, because in the end of the day, if we are to survive as a species, if we're not a peaceful state of, if we don't have a peaceful state of consciousness, there's going to continue to be conflict and division and confusion in the world, and nobody can really live, with any peace in their life if that's going to be if that's going to be the state of consciousness going forward for a lot of people. We've already tried that for thousands of years, right? We've had tons of wars and this and that from unsteady minds. So now is the time to invest in ourselves. Grizzly Adams, how do you stop an overthinking mind or negative thoughts? Exercise, meditation, limit screen time. Grizzly, you answered your question, my friend. Exercise is great for an overthinking mind. Yeah, there's actually now this is some of the science behind some of the practices, right, in Eastern spirituality. So sometimes when we're overthinking or we're dwelling in negative thoughts, it means that a lot of the time we can be stationary, we can be looking at a screen, or we can just be sitting down and overly thinking about something that may have happened in our life and so forth and so on. Now, in pranayama and in qigong, there's a lot of focus on lateral movements of the eye. Now, a lot of people discount this. Now, the lateral movement of your eyes actually has a neurological effect on your mind, which actually brings more peace and equanimity to your mind. So a lot of people, when they're in fear, they keep their mind is like this, right? Their eyes are like this. They're looking straight ahead as if they're looking at a lion and they're a gazelle on the savannah. And so they're like this. But what you want to do when you're overthinking is start to do some lateral movements. Now in Qigong, obviously you're doing head movements and then you're looking as further that way as possible when you're practicing Qigong. And you'll feel a looseness in the frontal lobe. And a lot of us don't consider that, obviously our eyes actually can exercise our brain. And this is actually knowledge in Eastern spirituality, and it has been for a long time. And it now is being recognized by neuroscience, right? So what they say in neuroscience now, and this is obviously older knowledge going back to the East, which they obviously don't give credit to. Science don't like spirituality. We know that. But it's that when you're doing these lateral movements, you want to focus, Grizzly, on a negative emotion or thought that you are having. And what this does is it retrains your emotion and reaction to that negative thought. So instead of the negative thought arising and emotions and fear arising, if you practice lateral movements, it begins to loosen those hardened pathways in your mind. And then you have a different reaction to that fear or negative emotion. It doesn't consume you as it once done before. And there's a lot of science about this already in neuroscience, which I can't go into depth about because I'm not a neuroscientist, but I can just tell you from the Eastern perspective, it's been like that for a long time. And so that practice in itself can retrain your brain and to react to negative emotions and fear in a different way. And that's why they do this in pranayama and also in qigong, because if you do this, especially first thing in the morning, your mind is very loosened up. Now there's one, actually, this will look stupid for you guys, but there's a Korean neuroscientist, right? And he's studied this as well, the lateral eye movement and how it somehow overcomes or somehow retrains your relationship to fear and negative emotions, and also overthinking. Helps you to get out of overthinking. He does this practice. Now it looks stupid. I'll try and do it within the screen. But you look at your two hands together like this, and you slowly make an infinite, but you constantly stare at your hands. Now, if you're like me and you look stupid right now and you're doing it, then thank you for joining me. But what this does is, and what they found in neuroscience is that the reason why we like to go for a walk and exercise when we do overthink or this and that, or why we feel better, I should say, why we feel better when we go for a walk when we're overthinking, or when we exercise, we feel better, is because when we're walking, our eyes naturally, we don't know this, but our eyes are always moving laterally because we're scanning the environment. And so what neuroscience found out is that had a big impact on the mind. Obviously, the Eastern traditions knew about this. This is why they made an effort to actually make practices based on lateral eye movement. But it's kind of interesting, like I said, with the Korean neuroscientist. I mean, it's funny because Guy Young, even this morning, she was doing this, and it kind of looks, you look like a damn fool, but it works. It works. It really does. I remember actually practicing pranayama in Skanda Ashram in Tiruvannamalai, and people are like looking at me, and I'm like, my eyes are going like this, because you go like, you move your eyes with whichever nostril you're doing, or sometimes you can do it with the opposite, and you do look very silly. But in India, you don't look silly because most Indians, they know what you're up to. But then when foreigners see you doing it, they're like, that's that wacko doing his eye movement thing. Alan, what advice do you have for a person to get out of the second chakra, constant seeking, pleasure seeking? This is a difficult one, Alan, because it's really a personal thing for a lot of people, and sometimes depends on their constitution. But we can all work with this, right? We can all deal with this. What advice would I have for that? That is interesting. Let's have a look. Let's unpack that. I'm just looking at some of the. I love all these questions. Thank you for all being here. 58 in the room. Make sure you give a thumbs up. Alan, it depends on what sort of lifestyle you are living. Like, are you living a life that's hedonistic? I mean, are you living a life that you because often a lot of the time when people are, and you said it, right? When we're in the second chakra, we're seeking pleasure by food, pleasure by sex, pleasure by entertainment, but it's in a sense that it's over the top, right? So it's not like, you don't want to demonize like eating pleasurable food or having sex or seeking entertainment. If you look at the four Purushatras in the Dhammic tradition, sex and all of that are not demonized. But if we dwell on the second chakra, we seek it too much, right? We indulge. And so once we indulge, then we have no moderation and we lose the middle way. We lose our balance. So I don't know if you have a meditation practice. Obviously, a meditation practice will begin to down-regulate the effect of your second chakra. And also, if you stop feeding the second chakra. Now, obviously what I mean by that is making an effort to reduce your consumption of maybe food, or your consumption of, I don't know, if you're talking a lot about sexual desires, like a lot of people these days have addictions to pornography and things like that, because pornography is easily accessible online. And so you want to rein that in. If that was a problem, you need to rein all of these habits in, and you have to go deeper into your meditation practice, probably practice Vipassana, because if you want to retrain or if you want to clean out the basement of your samskaras, which actually contribute to the second chakra, then you want to do Vipassana practice, where you when you practice Vipassana meditation, you put your mind on the sensations in your body, which according to Buddhism are the subliminal imprints that they come through the sensorium of our body. But when we place our awareness on them, we can begin to rewrite or even some sense downregulate or eliminate subconscious impressions within our mind that contribute to this kind of these vasanas we have, these habits and tendencies we have to accumulate a lot of things. I would say try that and also simplify your life. I mean, a lot of people these days have such complex lives. They have so many possessions. They have so many likes and dislikes and opinions. Rein all that in. Rein it all in. Simplify your life. Become a spiritual minimalist. And it's really up to you to put the effort in to have the bodhicitta to alleviate all of that pleasure seeking and this and that, to get out of the second chakra so you can live in the third chakra, so to speak, or your energy is not housed in the second chakra. Skip Melts, Herring, thank you, my friend. Guys, 63 in the room, awesome. 63 thumbs up. Let's give a thumbs up if you haven't. I love and appreciate you all. Thank you for all being here. I hope you've been enjoying the content recently. Remember, these live streams don't stay up after we're finished here today. They are only exclusive to Patreon. So if you want to become a Patreon member, head on over to Patreon and you'll be able to watch all of these live streams, the replays of these live streams. Yeah. So let's have a look here. Brad, I recently found Zhuangzi with your help. Brad, music to my ears, my friend, music to my ears. Let's just have a look here. We got a lot of questions here. This is great. This is awesome. Keep them coming. Let me just see. What have we got? Brad Chappelle, Brad, in relation to Zhuangzi, I heard you explain that we get stuck between this and that. We can't find stillness. Is that why people like Alan Watts want us to have an innocent mind like a child, following the way? Florida, Florida, love it. Brad, yes. Well, the thing is that, and this is something I'm at the moment, I'm writing chapter 5 of my new book on Taoism, and something I was something I was writing about yesterday. And so what happens is that in the Zhuangzi, right, there's a knowledge of Qing. Now, Qing means species-specific essence. Now, in what this means, what Zhuangzi is talking about here is that each species has a specific essence. So like, a horse has a certain grace when it gallops, a turtle has a certain way to swim, there's all of these things. And Zhuangzi says that as a human, our species-specific essence is a flaw. Now, it's strange, right? But our essence is the ability to discern between this and that. And so what happens when we discern between this and that? We create likes and dislikes, good and evil, right and wrong. I don't like him. I don't like her. I like him. I like her. We create this whole matrix of duality based on this and that. And that's why in the Zhuangzi, there's a famous phrase, and I've put it in most of my books because I speak a bit about this, is Zhuangzi says, when there's no more this and that, we can see the infinite in all things. We reside in the still point of the Tao. And so when we get out of this idea of, or when we downregulate this habit we have to dissect life into pieces, into this and that, we can't see the Tao. We literally not like see, but like we can't sense or feel the Tao in our life because we live in this dualistic state of consciousness. When the Tao is a non-dualist school, it's about non-duality, about the oneness of existence, about wholeness. And if we constantly are dwelling there, we can't really experience that. Yeah. So you have Qing, right? So you have Qing, and so Zhuangzi's mentality about this, Brad, is fasting the mind. This is his medicine for it. That's why one of the reasons why I wrote the book Fasting the Mind, because I talk about this, and Miss Sen mentioned before she read it. And so, and also that this is also in Hindu philosophy as well. If we look at Vedanta, there's the philosophy of neti neti. Neti neti in Sanskrit means not this, or we could say not this, not that, to be clever, right? And so what that means is it's kind of like a mental renunciation. A mental renunciation of discernment is what they're saying. And so it's funny because, as you mentioned with Alan Watson, An Innocent Childlike Mind, that's what Alan's talking about, but that's also what all of the great teachers are talking about as well. To reclaim our innocence and to reclaim our, our childlike mind is to get rid of that sort of habit of this and that and down regulating that. And it's funny when you begin to meditate long term for many, many years, you feel that actually that tendency to dissect between this and that actually begins to down regulate, and you don't have it as much. Sure, you know what an apple is and you know what an orange is, but you don't turn that into anything more than what it is, right? You don't, again, associate with what I was talking about before. We don't look at the linguistic framework as an object, right? The name is there, but we don't confuse the name essentially with the nature of the form and so forth and so on. So you need a form of, like neti neti, you need a form of mental renunciation, of getting out of that habit of discernment. But the easiest way to do that, Brad, is to try and also examine your own sort of opinions on things and your own sort of likes and dislikes. Now, as I said, it doesn't mean obviously you might like the taste of an apple as opposed to an orange. That's a constitutional thing. That doesn't really matter. You don't need to make that into something. But what happens usually is that when we have likes and dislikes and this and that, we usually create conflict. We create our own version of morality. We politicize everything. And so this is where all the trouble begins, right? So when people say to me, how would we resolve all of this political turmoil in the US, for example? Well, you got to get out of the idea of this and that. I mean, it's too radical a way of thinking for most people because they are so firm in their opinions and their views of life, but they don't understand that their views of life and this and that is a combination of this human flaw and also socialization, which is built on this human flaw, which is what Zhuangzi points out. Colin, Colin, good to see you, my friend. Always good to see you, Cole. Let me just get a drink of water. I love it. We're going off today. We're all in the mood, I think. Can you relate frugality to desires of the eye and belly? Yeah. Yep, definitely, Cole. Frugality, you could actually relate to the desires of the belly, right? Like the natural desires, being frugal and having a sense of moderation, right? I think most of us in here are probably, in some sense, a little frugal, right? We're all a little frugal in our ways because we're not, I don't know, we're not looking for the shiny lights. We don't need the big houses and the big cars. And, so again, that frugality can definitely be related to Taoism and simplicity and also the desires of the belly. There's no doubt about it. Lane, your last podcast about how years of studying Eastern philosophy can cause you to separate from society, could it also cause a person to be less motivated in their career or changing careers? Yeah, it probably could. But that would be, in a sense, from maybe a more of a novice perspective. If you had a Jason Freeze is a good time to practice letting go. You guys can hear me? Yes? Hello? You guys, can you hear me? Am I live? Am I live? Yeah, guys, you there? All right. Sorry about that. About 20 people dropped off the stream. Anyway, all good. Thank you for sticking around, the ones who are there. Lane, I was saying, yes, from a novice perspective, it can make you feel that way. But once you've advanced on the path a little bit, decisions like changing your career or being motivated in your career are seen in some sense a little objectively, yeah, because the the pragmatic elements of life have to be taken care of as well, right? Like, so you need to, have food, clothing, and shelter. And usually, if you need to have food, clothing, and shelter, you need to make some sort of living in some sense. But you have the ability to live in both worlds, so to speak, right? So you can follow the path sincerely, but also just have live your ordinary life in the best way possible without overly engaging in the mundaneness of it. Yeah, you have to try and find a balance in that, of not going too far into the mundaneness, maybe of whatever it is your job is, or whatever career you're chasing, and also keeping your balance. Obviously, if you look at the ancients, they would completely remove themselves from society, and they would not chase a career or anything like this. But in this day and age, most of us who are on this live stream have a computer, have an internet connection, they have bills to pay. So you need to keep a little bit of balance and common sense about that. So yes and no. It can cause maybe a novice to be less motivated. But at the same time, you don't want to also think that having motivation is the pinnacle, the be all and end all. I mean, that's a Western idea, right? That we ought to be motivated and we ought to suck it up and have drive. And yes, that can be good for your career and that can be good for your bottom line. But in the East, traditionally, they're not overly motivated people in some sense. I mean, obviously they have motivation, but it wasn't to the extent that it has been in the West, though it is becoming that way. Don't get me wrong, because the way the East is going. But we don't want to make being motivated in our careers the main things in our life. I mean, they are things that we can do, but that doesn't mean that's who we are, right? Doesn't mean that's who we are. It's what we do. It's the role we play, but it's not who we are. So we need to invest more on the who we are perspective, and then the what we do perspective will take care of itself. Sterling, thank you, my friend. Thank you. Like to publish Ueshiba's Art of Peace. Finn, if the Westerners need to know something about Tao and inner self, Jason is presenting such knowledge very, very well to the Westerners and other parts of the world. He must talk about the Tao. Finn, thank you for your support, my friend. Thank you. There's nothing wrong with talk. See, again, people, we don't want to demonize having a conversation about spiritual topics. What's one of the main practices of Zen Buddhism? Tea ceremony. What do you do in tea ceremony? You don't turn up to tea ceremony and talk about Hollywood. You turn up to tea ceremony and you talk about philosophy. What I find funny with people when they say, "Oh, those who speak don't know the Tao," then you see their life and they're talking about Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie and this and that, and it's like, I don't know, man. That's what Lao Tzu's talking about. You're talking about frivolous stuff and not stuff that matters. So when you're talking and you're gossiping and you have verbal diarrhea, then you don't know the Tao. If you're speaking about the Tao in a controlled environment like we're doing here, then there's nothing wrong with that. It actually helps develop. It helps you guys because you're listening to me, but it also helps me reading your questions and allowing me to try and verbally answer your questions. And then that helps us to deepen our knowledge on what we are interested in, right? So All right. These questions are great. Keep them coming. Sohra Mahatma Ziguji. Namaste. Namaste. Nice to have you with us. Raul, Jason, can you explain the difference between soul and spirit as it is known in the West? Is it something similar to the difference between Jiva and Atman, or maybe these are not comparable concepts? Raul, it's a good question, actually. It depends on the Western tradition too, right? Like a lot of the Western traditions, they say soul, but they also mean spirit. So it's like kind of like an either or thing, right? So it's different. It's difficult because the thing is that, and I made a couple of videos on this about the soul, so to speak, which I recommend going and look at the podcast with Guy Young and myself on the soul. And also I have a video on what is the soul. But when we talk about the Atman itself is undifferentiated consciousness. And so often when we think about soul, we're talking about an inner essence of the person, right? Like something related to the person, which would be then the jiva. So in Hinduism, the jiva, you could say the spirit. Yeah, you could say the spirit is the jiva as well. I mean, you could get away with that. But the thing is, the soul, the spirit, in relation to the jiva, is the personal essence you have. So it's the thing that will live life after life, right? It'll be what reincarnates. So that's different as opposed to the Atman, which the Atman is undifferentiated consciousness. But a lot of people will relate the soul to Atman, but it's not. So Christians and Western religions will do that, but that's actually not the way it is. So, and also the spirit in Taoism, which is Shen, you could say is somewhat different, as opposed to related to like they wouldn't say like the soul in Taoism, right? They might say the genuine person, or the genuine individual, the genuine sage, the authentic sage, the authentic person. So guys, there's 50 in the room, only 67 thumbs up. Give a thumbs up. Let's have a look. Shraddha, Nish, Haribo. So good. What's this one? Yogi Ness. I've been reading Thich Nhat Hanh's translation and interpretation of the Yoga Sutra. What is your interpretation of this sutra? Is it okay to ask teachers about how they interpret it and other sutras? Yeah, that's totally fine. That's a complex sutra. I read Katsikuku's translation. I have never read actually Thich Nhat Hanh's. And I'm assuming, Yoginess, you're talking about form as emptiness and emptiness as form. Can you let me know? Is that the confusing part for you? Let's have a look. Lisa, wow, I wish I knew about this. I learned so much and then realized how much I don't know. Thank you. Glad to have you there. Nations Brothers from Maine. Great to have you with us, Nations Brothers. Thank you. Krish in the house. Awesome. Yes, insalubris. Tantric practices from both Hinduism and Tibetan Buddhism talk about the subtle body and the subtle mind. A lot of stories about them seem quite fantastical. What's your take on this? Again, some of them can come from bad translations into English, insalubris, but there is also a fantastical element especially with tantric practices, especially in Tibetan Buddhism, right? Even if we go into like Vajrayana and also Bon, where we find other tantric practices as well. But even in, like you said, in Shaivism, there can be. But when you read the traditions kind of as they are, they're not as fantastical as it makes more sense in the sense when we understand the energetic constitution of the body. And I understand that probably a bit more. I would recommend probably reading Georg Fursten's book on Tantra, or also the yoga tradition from Georg Fursten. But also read the Ishvara Gita, which gives you another understanding of Tantra according to Shaivism. But some of the problems, especially with tantric practices, is the translations when they come over into the West. And this is why that you can have an overly focused perspective on sex in the West with tantric practices, which again comes from misinterpretation. And a lot of people have become famous based on that misinterpretation, right? Because people in the West love sex, obviously, but everyone loves sex, but but there's a big focus on it, right? So keep the questions coming, people. There's a lot of great questions here. I'm trying to get through most of them. All right. Let's have a look. All right. Orbius Light, are you also invested in yoga? Yes, I am Orbius. Orbitus. Good to see you, Orbitus. Yes. Invested in yoga. What do you mean? Like, obviously I am. And did you watch well, I think it was like 2 or 3 podcasts ago where Gayung and I were speaking about the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, the first, I think it was first 11 sutras. And we have another one coming up soon, actually this week, with the next section of the Yoga Sutras. So yes, I am invested and do follow yoga, but yoga in a classical sense, traditional sense, not just hatha yoga, the actually yogic philosophy, the traditional philosophy, not just from Patanjali, but also from the Pashuputtas in Shaivism. Kuan Yin, hi. Kuan Yin, good. Great to have you with us. Codigo Branco, hi Jason. I love the video about the difference of Confucianism and Taoism. There are more other videos of yours that I love, though. Thank you, my friend. CB, thank you. Thank you, Teacher Jason. The fear that arises is my biggest block. I think for everyone, my friend. Cogdigo Branco, again, could you explain to me the differences between Buddhism and Taoism? Well, that's a longer conversation. Depends on which Buddhism. If we look at Zen Buddhism and Taoism, they are very similar, but the differences are more about the history of the traditions, obviously, and the spiritual practices and way of cultivation. But you can see the influence of Taoism on Zen Buddhism, especially within koans, about acting spontaneously, being immediate and appropriate in each and every situation. But and some people actually, like some scholars such as Edward Slingland, speculate that Zhuangzi was the first Zen Buddhist. I mean, or Zhuangzi may be Bodhidharma. I mean, some people do think like that. I don't buy into that. But definitely, when Buddhism migrated to China, there was a mixture of both, which became Chan, which became Zen Chan in China and became Zen in Japan and Korea. So they are similar in that sense, but very far apart if we look at it from just the traditionalist Mahayana, Vajrayana, and Theravada Buddhist traditions as to Taoism. I shouldn't say very far apart. They're similar in the context that the main essence of the teaching is the dissolution of the identity. It's the realization that the mind itself is essentially empty. The self is empty. The persona is empty. It's only a thing that grows over time due to the environment it is within. So it's an accumulative sense of self. All of us have that accumulative sense of self, which is called the ego, which becomes an interface with sometimes that environment. And it's kind of ironic because when you take someone who is used to a particular environment into a new environment, they find a lot of conflict because their kind of software, their hardware begins to break down when they come across new softwares, right? So there are a lot of differences, but a lot of similarity in the essence of the teachings. And I probably should do a video on that because there's a lot to talk about that. Cameron, Tobin, I very much enjoyed your video on overpopulation. Thank you, my friend. That's from a while ago, that one. Shraddha Nish, yes. Len, good advice at my age, just 62. Thank you. Thank you, Len. Len, you're still awake. Thank you for staying awake. Aaron, porn good or bad? Well, Aaron, it depends on, you don't want to make anything into, again, like what we were saying with the habit of this and that. You don't want to make it into some sort of Christian ideal of being good or bad. But like with anything, you can indulge too much, yeah, which will put you off balance. And especially when we talk about sex, because there's a lot of sexual energy is a different thing, right? So if you're constantly invested in sexual energy, this is why they often say they have a feeling of like they feel very dark or empty or low from being in that sort of energy for too long. So it can be negative if you're obviously indulging too much. And I mean, what to say, like, because anything we say about the porn industry will just delve into our own personal perspectives of morality. But my advice to everyone would be to try and avoid pornography, as much as possible that you can, because it's a new thing, right? It's such a new thing, and essentially it's not natural. So if we look at it from a Taoist perspective, it's kind of not natural to have those sorts of visuals at our fingertips whenever we want, right? So that can be a negative experience, and obviously is a negative experience for a lot of people because we do know about porn addiction and this and that in this day and age. So on the spiritual path, it's probably better to avoid that. Though I know a lot of you may be single and you still do have sexual desires. So none of us are Christians here on this live stream, so we don't make it into some sort of moralistic game and belittle people for indulging. But in saying that, as I said, best to avoid it as much as possible. Norma Skydower, opinions are like assholes. We all have one. Yeah, that's true. But at the same time, when you're on the spiritual path, you're trying to downregulate that opinionated mentality. And I know that it can be difficult to exist or coexist in a world with a bunch of people who do have a lot of opinions and essentially are assholes because they do have a lot of opinions. But you need to, if you're invested in spiritual cultivation, you need to kind of downregulate that sense of being opinionated and having a lot of views. And it goes into what I was talking to with Brad before about the idea of this and that. So when we begin to work on that fundamental human flaw, then we will downregulate our opinions and allow life to be as it will without our interference, which is the path of Wu-Wei. Lisa, anything that is temporary is an illusion. Yes. Kuan Yin, do you have any advice on resistance to meditation? What do you mean, Kuan Yin? Resistance in which sense? Like you just resist the practice, or there is resistance in your practice? If you can clarify, please. James, yeah, thank you, my friend. Michael, it's not about belief. Well, it's not. What are you talking about, Michael? In that sense. Mick, just wanted to say hello. Hola, Mexico. Great to have you with us. Jose, hi. Good to see you, Jose. Excellent job. Let's have a look. Nathan, what's this, Finn? Once you walk the path, you know nothing more than this mess, my friend. A wonderful discovery. You almost can't go back to mundane personhood after. Where's the rest of your thing, Finn? It's not there. I don't know where it is. Okay, anyway, let's keep going. This is awesome. Let's have a look. See that? All right. Lisa, most of us are here to learn and discuss. If it doesn't vibe with you, don't watch. At least you gave it a go, I guess. Lisa, thank you. See, one thing I don't understand about social media, Lisa, which you obviously understand, is people get so angry when they see something they don't like. It's a funny thing, isn't it? Like that, what social media has opened up for people. Because in the old days, right, like when I was growing up, there was only TV. So if you didn't like a program, you didn't get angry about it. You just changed the channel, or you went outside for a walk or something. I mean, this habit of being emotionally reactive is really strange, and is a thing that I'm going to speak about in my next book next year, spiritual freedom in the digital age, where I talk about the birth of trolls and the psychological impact that mentality is having on the peace and equanimity, not only of the individual but of the collective. So, and we all have a duty in some sense to continue to practice, to harness peace and equanimity, and to be to have common courtesy for our brothers and sisters in the world. Instead of like, I mean, I've never in my life watched a video and went, "Oh, I don't like it." If I don't like a video, I just move on. Like, I don't understand. I never understood that mentality. It's strange. Heather, hey Jason, I'm glad to get to watch them for a bit. Heather, great to have you with us. Heather's a Patreon. Thank you, Heather. Let's have a look. Michael, in my experience, all of these things were acted out in order to feel comfortable in the present moment and try to replicate the security and comfort experience in utero. I don't know, just idea or knowing true freedom and peace or heaven in previous experience. Michael, I don't sort of know where. Anyway, I'll come back to that. Luther, what do you mean by the ego's personal predestined karma? Well, this is in Hinduism, Luther, specifically in Vedanta, it's called Prarabdha karma. So Prarabdha karma is personal predestined karma. So kind of from that perspective, the karma you will experience according to your jiva. Yeah. So according to the aptitude of your jiva, and what I mean by jiva here, for those who don't know, is ego or persona system, the accumulative sense of self that we all have because we've all existed in the world. And so that's what I mean by that. So what that means is the experiences that you have as Luther are there are the karma for Luther to grow on a personal level, or to, in some sense, it can be a negative experience, right? So Ramana Maharshi actually has a really great quote when he said to when his mum when he left home, right, at 16, his mum couldn't find him. She found him living on Arunachala, right? And he was 7 years in silence. And she found him after many years. And he wouldn't speak because he was 7 years in silence. And so he wrote a letter to her and sort of said, what will happen will happen. Do what you may to try and prevent it. What will not happen will not happen. Do what you may to try and make it happen. Everything is determined by one's own prarabdha karma, one's own personal predestined karma. So we can do a lot of things to try and control our life and to try and change the destiny of our life, so to speak. But according to Vedanta and Hinduism, there's still a predestined personal karma that will play out, even though you think you control your life. And we should know this in some sense, because when we look at how we control our life, we really control a minuscule of our life, right? I can control the time that this live stream happens. You can control coming to this live stream, but other things like the internet connection dropping out or the camera falling down or things like this is just out of our hands. There's a lot of things and a lot of variables we can't control. So that's kind of what we're talking about, Luther. It's a more deeper subject, and I would highly recommend going and watching my video on karma, because I do speak about predestined karma. I also speak about it in my video on Advaita Vedanta, if you're interested. Yes. Everyone's here. Good. 75 thumbs up. Give us a thumbs up, everyone. Let's get over 100 thumbs up, yeah? 53 in the room. Awesome. My numbers in the live stream always fluctuate between 65 to 50, kind of in this realm, yeah? So that means that most of you stick around. Some of you, have other things to do, obviously, or come across by accident. Then you're sure. Hey, Jason, do you practice shamatha meditation to go deeper and expand your awareness along with Vipassana? Yes. Well, it's interesting, Dan, as you know, because you mentioned shamatha. Shamatha is almost like the first stage before Vipassana in some sense. So you need to have tranquility. Now, for those who don't know, shamatha meditation is the meditation of kind of harnessing tranquility. And it's also not even such as a meditation practice, but as almost like an attitude or a behavioral trait, which is having a sense of calm and equanimity and tranquility in your life, which then allows you to go deeper into insight, which is Vipassana, insight meditation. Insight means into the nature of existence itself. And that's kind of one of the first levels or stages of the four jhanas. So yes, shamatha is very important, Dan, and I highly recommend for those who are interested in shamatha meditation to go and read Alan Wallace's books. Alan Wallace he's a brilliant scholar, particularly on Tibetan and Mahayana Buddhism, but he's also very schooled in also Theravada Buddhism. But he has a book called Stilling the Mind. That's on Jungpo Trungpa's Vajra Essence Shamatha teachings. There's a lot of other books that he has. I think Attention Revolution, which is one. So I highly recommend him. Oh, even just look up Alan Wallace online and you will not regret listening to one of his lectures. He's a brilliant individual. Heather, I lost connection. Heather, I hope you're back. Sue just signed on. So enjoyed your most recent post regarding finding freedom, liberation by losing interest in this in the world. Sue, thank you for becoming a new Patreon too, Sue. Thank you. I see everyone's name when they become a Patreon, and I try to actually write, but I thank you here personally. Thank you for becoming a Patreon, and yes, I appreciate all my patrons. And you enjoyed that podcast. That's really good. That podcast came about because Guy and I were at a satsang back in 2010 with Muji, and I mentioned this many times in the thing on the live stream actually, where an individual, a man, he was about, let's say about 50, right? And he had been practicing meditation and particularly self-inquiry, so vichara, the practice that Ramana Maharshi actually recommends. He'd been practicing that for a few decades, and he went to Muji because you can go up to Muji and you can ask a question, and it was much more intimate back in the day. It wasn't the Muji that you see now with, it's massive, and it was much more with people who were very sincere about Advaita Vedanta. And he used to go to Tiruvannamalai, so these satsangs were happening in Tiruvannamalai, and then the guy was kind of like, I don't have any interest anymore, and like social interests. I've lost social interests, and Muji was like, very great, very great. Because it's kind of a sign of that your mind has kind of disentangled from drama and from being caught in the detail of life. Yeah. And so that means that, as I was talking before about that spiritual plane of consciousness, you're beginning to disentangle from the mental and physical planes of consciousness, and you're dwelling more on a higher state of perception and not being caught in the drama of worldly existence. The world is always vying for your attention. Yeah, it's always vying for your attention to get engaged, to have an opinion. And then the Eastern spiritual paths are about saying, to hell with that. I'm sick of that. It only contributes to more suffering, not just for other people, but also for myself. On the spiritual path, we're seeking peace and equanimity, and we're trying not to cause any harm on others, and also trying not to incur any harm on ourselves. So, which is very important. Yeah, very important. Big Dog, when are you going to India? Big Dog, man, I wish now. Let's open the world up, and I'll come there next week. Yeah, let's open it up, and hopefully soon. Yeah, hopefully soon. Next year, I'm slowly organizing the tours for next year. So I hope that I can have an Indian, Nepal, and Thailand tour organized for, say, the middle to late next year. Oh, Michael, Ashtavakra Gita and Ribhu Gita have been read over and over in the English translation. Even though I'm just a Westerner, these are the languages that my heart responds to. Can you recommend any others? I've also been reading Avadutta as well, but wondering what else would reach just the same. Michael, I highly recommend the Mandukya Kataka, the Mandukya Upanishad Kataka, with the Gaudapada and Shankara translation. The whole book is translated by Swami Nikhilananda. Swami Nikhilananda, he was a brilliant translator in the early 1900s. And so also Self-Knowledge by Shankara as well. Again, translated by Swami Nikhilananda. Grab those two. If you love the Nidhyasana texts, see the Ashtavakra Gita, the Ribhu Gita are considered Nidhyasana texts. They and the Avadutta Gita are the Nidhyasana texts that should be read kind of after one's realization. And so they're non-dual meditations or non-dual contemplations. And the Mandukya Upanishad Kataka is one of those as well. So I highly recommend that one. And I'm so happy that you read the Ashtavakra and the Ribhu and the Avadutta Gita. The Ashtavakra and the Avadutta Gita particularly are some of the greatest texts in the world. The Ribhu Gita is good too. But I guess a lot of people don't like the Ribhu Gita particularly because it's very repetitive. Yeah, it's more repetitive than probably the Ashtavakra and the Avadutta Gita aren't that repetitive. But the Ribhu Gita is particularly repetitive because in that stanza format, the sutra format back in the ancient times, they often wrote the text like that because you had to remember more. It was more about remembering as opposed to reading. So you would read the text and you would pass it on, but you're constantly trying to reinforce that knowledge in your mind. So Makes me so happy that you're reading those, Michael. Thank you. Finn, spot on. Thank you, Finn. With whatever, Jason, what is the source of our thoughts? Since they grow and arise of themselves, are they a function of our cognition alone or coming into our sphere of thoughts from elsewhere? Love your YouTube. Thank you. They're actually Austin from Rhode Island. Thank you. They're a combination of both. It's a combination of that, it's like the chicken and the egg discussion, right? So your samskaras is constantly turned on, right? So you're accumulating subliminal imprints from the day you're born. And so they affect your way of thinking. And so then we have these spontaneous thoughts that arise, which actually can be stimulated by similar experiences, but not the same experience. Yeah. Which can affect the way that we see reality. And that often happens. It often affects the way we see reality because we are dwelling on the actual samskaras. And so you might have, for example, a dog might have bit you in the past, and you might see a dog that's a similar dog, but it evokes a similar response in you, even though the dog's looking at you and it's smiling. So this is a thing, right? So it's kind of like a chicken or the egg thing, right? Like it's either that it's thoughts arise naturally, but we link the thoughts. This is where a lot of the troubles happen, right? We link the thoughts with past experiences. So we wander with the thoughts, and then we have this continuity of thought, which then creates this sense of self. So we have to realize that thoughts themselves are unsupported, as they talk about in Eastern spirituality, and they arise spontaneously. So we have to see then that you have to then hone in on your meditation practice and try to get into your samskaras. Then you will start to witness the thoughts as they are, as opposed to wandering with the thoughts. Yeah. Michael, I'm just a Westerner. Come on. Not just a Westerner. You're an awesome individual, Michael. Yogi Ness, yep, emptiness, no doubt. Colin, morality can often justify division and conflict. Is right action contextual and not prescriptive? How does it fit with Taoist amorality? Yes, you are right, Cole. It is right action. See, again, like what I was mentioning before with the spiritual practices, particularly in Zen and Taoism, it's all about acting immediately and appropriately to each and every situation. And the problem in our world is we make categories for certain things, but we apply no discretion, right? So there's no discretion. We have black and white interpretations of everything. But when you live in the natural world, everything's not exactly the same. You need to apply discretion, and your actions need to, equate to what is actually happening, as opposed to the rules and regulations that have been forged upon you. Yeah. So that's the problem. Yeah. So when we have a system of morality, no matter whether it's Christian or Islamic or whatever, your sense of morality is warped because you're acting from those rules and regulations, as opposed to what the actual experience is trying to evoke. Yeah. So that's how like a Taoist would fit. That's how amorality, that's nature's morality, right? Like you don't have a system of morality, but you act in accord with what's happening. And that's Mencius's point with the child in the well story, right? The child in the well story is about like harnessing that feeling we have when we experience a certain thing. So when we see a child about to fall into a well, we all have an overwhelming sensation to save that child, right? So you don't need some religion to tell you that you feel like that. You naturally feel like that, right? And so Taoism lean into that, and so that's why their so-called their amorality is actually nature's morality itself. So, oh, we got a super chat. Oh, Art in the house. Thank you, Art. Hi, Jason. Sorry I'm late. I put in a question in the feed that got broken up in 2 parts. Much love. Thank you. Thank you for the super chat. Much appreciated. I will find it. What have we got here? Orbitus, Light. Yeah, I remember now. You ever thought about doing a podcast with Sadhguru? Would that even be possible? Probably not. Sadhguru is one of those people now who's probably not accessible. He probably was about 10 years ago. But I would if there was an opportunity for sure. But it's kind of strange with Sadhguru now because you have a lot of actors and this and that interviewing him and this and, and his knowledge is probably a little bit above their head because a lot of, the world is kind of strange, right? A lot of people give actors and this and that too much credit. And a lot of people project certain qualities that actors and this and that are very knowledgeable people and this and that. But they're no more knowledgeable than anyone in this chat, right? They just have a platform and they're good at a particular skill, which is acting. And unfortunately, a lot of them have a sense of like a new age sense of spirituality. Yeah. So I've seen some interviews with Sadhguru with some actors and influencers and people who are famous where the interviews go a little pear-shaped because of what he is talking about. And they're not particularly familiar with Eastern spirituality per se. Yeah. Just getting a drink of water here. What have we got here? Oh, another super chat. Who's that? Michael, thank you. Much love to you, Michael, always. Okay, what have we got? Jason, have you watched any of Robert Seffer's YouTube work about the blue-eyed Buddhas? Recommended. My higher self told me I was cheating by using porn. No, I haven't. I don't know who that is. Robert Seffer. Sorry, Seb. William, to what extent have Christian-inspired ethics survived in more secular countries like Australia? Well, they have survived in the sense that still embedded within secularism is the Christian moral framework, right? And so this is a big problem in places like such as India, for example, where you have this sense of coloniality or colonial consciousness, that when we talk about colonial consciousness, we have to talk also about Christianity because it's part and parcel of it. Even though the country may be secular, it's still informed by an older tradition. And so this is what India is trying to attempt to, disentangle themselves from through the new Hindu Renaissance movement that we see in India. So it survived in the sense that the morality and the ethics and that still exist in Australian society, but you would say most Australians are, you would say, atheists. But even in saying that, as I've discussed many times on this live stream and also in some of my podcasts and videos, is that even atheism itself is informed by Christianity to a subtle degree. So What have we got here? Shum 3000. Why this fake guru thing? Food, sex, or whatever enjoyment is not bad, as long as you are self-realized. That is self, is not ego, mind, body, mind, emotions. In reference to what, Shum? I don't know what you're saying. Who said that one? Maybe you misinterpreted something. Funny, people have a strange way of interpreting things. Maybe you watch someone that said something like that, but people get emotional. All right, lunchboxes beat movie TV. What is it? I know you are a practicing Taoist, but do you have any advice on reaching Satori? I would say school yourself more on Zen. I would say read Hubert Benoit's book, The Supreme Zen. And also, you have to get out of the idea of reaching Satori. Again, the idea of reaching Satori itself is a blind alley, as Hubert Benoit says. It's a blind alley. But also Shunryu Suzuki talked about that as well. You have to practice for the sake of practicing. That's the point of Zen Buddhism. And I know that sounds boring for people because all you end up doing is looking at walls, but that's the nature of the practice. It's about practicing meditation because that's what Buddhas do. You're not practicing to attain Satori. You're not practicing to attain Nirvana. You're practicing because human beings are supposed to meditate. They're supposed to observe their mind because the human organism is the most complex organism on the planet, and our mental framework is the most complex framework in the world. And so we ought to be conscious and aware of what's going on within that matrix within our mind. So I would take that one off the burner, lunchbox. I'd take that one off the burner, the idea of reaching Satori, and go deeper into your practice and your study. And it's one of those things, right? Like if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And in Zen monasteries and this and that, they don't really make a thing of that. They don't really ask those sort of questions. Zora, YouTube is doing strange things. Always does. There you are. Kuan Yin, yeah, yes, resistance to meditation practice, having difficulty with the mind. Yes. Well, the thing is that as soon as you sit down to meditate, Kuan Yin, we all experience this, right? Is that the mind itself thinks it's a stupid exercise. It thinks it's a stupid waste of time because there's other things to do. We could be doing other things, right? Like, why would I sit down to meditate for half an hour, 45 minutes, when I can go out for a walk, or I can make some breakfast, I can surf the web, you can do all of these things. But you have to fight that urge. I mean, there's going to be a resistance, but the more you practice, the less the resistance is, even though there'll be some days that you may wake up and you might have a lot of tasks to do. And that's when resistance will arise, when there's a lot of other things to do. So one advice I would say is try to get the night before, try to get as much rest as you can. Try not to have a lot of food that will overly stimulate your mind, which then will allow the resistance to subside. Yeah. So, and also to reduce your digital consumption the night before. If you're up to 11 at night and you're still on your phone and this and that, your meditation practice in the morning is going to be terrible, and your mind is going to be so agitated. It's like the resistance is more so just an agitated mind rather than anything else. Yeah. So I would say work on your nightly habits before, and then also, even if there still is resistance, working with that and continually to work with that, and not in the sense of fighting it, but just probably remaining in that experience of the uncomfortability of the resistance. Because, usually after 20 or so minutes, you'll feel that loosen up. It's within the first 5 minutes that you can get up and walk away and get annoyed with, because you have other things to do, right? So the mind's tendency is to be active and to do things, but you're trying to retrain it to come back to its empty, spontaneous, and free nature. Everything is connected. Jason, I've read all of Alan Wallace's books. My favorite passage is the one where he describes eating a peanut butter sandwich to the fullest. I tried it, felt like my whole soul was on fire. Yes, Alan's really good like that, isn't he? He really articulates the simple things. Yeah, giving yourself to the experience of eating a peanut butter sandwich. It's very zen. We don't really give ourselves to anything, do we? Particularly not eating. Art. I got interested in an author or two who you follow. I quoted one and got one of my followers riled up. I looked up the author, whom I won't mention the name. I saw he has exposed his political views. I was bewildered because I was interested in his books on Hinduism. Still was so awkward to have one of my followers overreact to my retweet of that author about nothing having to do with his political views. Yes, there's a art. Again, Twitter, because I know you from Twitter too. Twitter is like a toilet wall, right? Like you can just write anything on a toilet wall and just leave. See you later, and then someone else writes something else. And I mean, it's a shit show, yeah. I mean, we all know that. So I wouldn't be overly like confused about that because that's the nature of social media. There's some strange people out there, and I wouldn't be overly confused about that. If they're being aggressive to you on Twitter or something like that, just block them and you don't have to feel any sort of guilt about that. I mean, most of the people we know online are strangers. And I still operate from the reality that the way we treat each other in the real world is how we should treat each other online. So that means we have manners, we have common courtesy. That's the world that I live in. And that's why I try to keep the sanctity of my comment section, especially in the YouTube comments, safe for you guys, because there's a lot of crazy people out there who may just accidentally come across one of my videos and they are not, maybe they have no equanimity of mind, and they are probably they need to vent from their own life experiences on a stranger. Yeah. So. All right, let's have a look here. Mitch Koski, namaste, Mitch. Have you considered doing meditation classes? Yes, I have. I don't know the sort of the format that I would do. Let me know if you guys would want to do something like that on Zoom or maybe a more private platform as opposed to like, YouTube, which is pretty public. Yeah. Len, I'm afraid the timer has beaten me. 1:30 a.m. here in the UK. And I need to go to bed. Len, thank you for being with us. Go to bed, man. It's too late. Hingle, Mick Cringeberry. Hello. Hingle, thank you for being with us. Preston. Namaskar, Preston. Thank you for being with us. Awesome. 6574. Do you live in Thailand? No, I used to live in Thailand. Not at the moment. I'm in Australia. But we are planning to go back to Thailand soon, hopefully. $65.74. What does Taoism say about hair? Should we keep it keep it, grow the beard naturally, etc. It doesn't say anything about that 65. Just do as you do what is natural to you. If you like short hair, cut your hair. You like long hair, grow your hair. That's it. You want a beard, grow a long beard. We shouldn't. I see this a lot where a lot of people think that these traditions have like an answer for everything. Lao Tzu is not concerned about if you have long hair or short hair. These are private matters that you don't even have to talk about. Yeah. These are like, simple things that you do as you do you. Yeah. You like short hair? You have short hair. I used to have long hair, but I got sick of having long hair, so I cut my hair. And then I used to shave my head. Now I don't shave my head, but I might shave my head again. Who knows? But it's nothing to really think about, is it? Preston, when one has an enlightenment experience, can their level of understanding deteriorate over time, or does that person simply keep that level of understanding? Preston, it depends. Like we were talking about Satori before, right? So there's often a lot of cases where someone has a Satori experience, but they haven't had kind of like the actual real realization or enlightenment, which means it can deteriorate. And this is why Ken Wilber actually said that those sorts of people can become spiritual assholes. So they have had a certain attainment, and they treat people very in a negative manner. Yeah. So they treat people negatively. They have a sense of piety and that they know better than someone else. And they have this game of spiritual one-upsmanship where you see this a lot, yeah, with a lot of people. So we need to discern that enlightenment itself, though we can look at it from an experiential level, is still non-experiential. It's not something that's within time. The realization may have been within time, but our fundamental nature is enlightenment, as I mentioned in my book, Enlightenment Now. So you have that experience, but you're not attached to the experience. I mean, I remember last live stream, someone was really vexed by the experience of the Kundalini, for example, but the Kundalini still is experiential, that experience. Yeah. It's not the settled equanimous state of enlightenment that is, we can say you can fluctuate a little bit with that. So if you look at the story of Ramana Maharishi, of course, he probably had times after his realization that he may have had situations that were annoying, but he came back to his center more often than not. Yeah, that's the difference. Where a lot of us can have an experience of self-realization, and then the world gets hold of us again, and then we're gone. Yeah. So it's about in some sense that can be due to the aptitude people have for this certain experience. So you've got to really try to hold on to that experience. Yeah. Well, not experience, but that state of consciousness that you've realized. All right, let's have a look here. Keep the questions coming, people. Awesome. There's a few trolls in the chat, so I get rid of those. So again, people with no manners and no common courtesy, tearing at the fabric of humanity. That's what they're about. So remember, 64 in the room, 84 thumbs up. Remember, give a thumbs up. With whatever, thank you so much for your insightful response. Would you say that clearing my samskaras could have a impact on healing chronic pain I believe myself plus others suffer due to these imprints? Yeah, because some of the imprints can be related they can be related to deeper samskaras, yeah, that affect us on a psychosomatic level. So we feel it physically. We may have a certain back pain or a certain pain within our neck or shoulders, and these can be related to underlying samskaras. So it can alleviate those. But obviously, if you look at that tradition from the yogic tradition's perspective, if you were practicing hatha yoga coupled with the understanding of samskaras and that sort of wheel of samsara framework, then that should be able to heal a lot of physical pain and alleviate a lot of suffering that you may be undergoing. Yeah. So, but it's not guaranteed. I think that one's really a horses for courses thing. And Salubris, a lot of gurus say that being relaxed during meditation isn't meditation. But I was listening to an Ajahn Brahm talk where he said that you should feel relaxed during meditation. What do you think? I 100% agree with Ajahn. I don't know who would say otherwise in Salubris. I don't know which guru you're talking about. Maybe better not to mention, but you should feel relaxed in meditation. I mean, there shouldn't be any tension. There can be tension when you begin, obviously, but you should be getting out of that habit. All right, let's have a look. And Salubris, by the way, I took your advice last time and have switched since to Anapana and Thai forest style walking meditation. That's awesome. It's I'm really happy you actually listened to Ajahn Brahm. Yeah, he's a direct disciple of Ajahn Chah. So, and actually, his monastery is in Western Australia, if you can believe that, in the middle of nowhere. But he comes from that Thai forest monastery tradition, like same as Ajahn Sumuddo, who I highly recommend. Matthew Joy, I hear a lot of gurus talking about ridding themselves of the ego. Is this a realistic aim when a lot of the ego's needs seem to stem from our primitive survival needs? Well, it again, like the complete dissolution of the ego or the complete eradication of the ego, in some sense, likely isn't possible in the sense that if you just talk about the ego as you're talking about it, from a primitive sense of survival and like an interface with reality. Yeah. Though in saying that, if you look at some of the traditions, like if you look at the Dattatreya tradition within India, that's probably the most strict and has the most impact on anyone, but it's also the most is the tradition that people fear the most because it's the complete dissolution of the ego, and to the point where that you become a sadhu and you leave society and you basically are like what the Buddha was originally, which is a shramana, which is you just walk in one direction without looking for food or this and that. If it comes by you, then you take it and so forth and so on. It's very, very strict. And I don't really recommend, I mean, I love the Dattatreya tradition, but I wouldn't recommend probably that for particularly a beginner on the spiritual path, because it's pretty mind-blowing to follow that sort of practice. Unless you really have a desire to become a yogi or a sadhu, then that's a whole different story. But if you're on YouTube and you're watching the live stream now, then I'm assuming that you're not, planning on becoming a sadhu. But the thing is, Matt, about all of that is that it's the belief in the ego and the identity that dissolves mainly, right? So you have a distance between this interface you have with the reality, which depends also on, obviously survival needs like food, shelter, and clothing. But that's a role, so to speak, to use Zhuangzi's terminology. And so that's a role, and you don't overly invest in that or engage in that or get involved in that, that state of consciousness, because there's a lot of this and that mentality with that, right and wrong and so forth and so on. John C in the house. John, welcome. How is the high desert today? Sue Mosley, curious, what style of music inspires you? Sue, I actually don't really listen to much music, to be honest with you. My favorite band, and I've probably mentioned this before, is Tool. And so I've listened to Tool a lot, since I was a teenager. I've been to their concerts, I think, 4 times. Guyang and I went to a Tool concert actually February last year, just before the pandemic. And it was really awesome. So I like Tool. I like older music, but I listen to a lot of mantras, both Buddhist and Hindu, and also just listening to a lot of Chinese flute, Indian flute music. And also listen to like I said, a lot of Buddhist mantras, Thai style, Sri Lankan style, Indian style. They have a different flavor, right? Between those 3 particularly. The Sri Lankan, the mantras in Sri Lanka are really beautiful. There's actually a tradition in Sri Lanka called Mahamevnya, which I really recommend. There's that tradition. You can find them easily online. You can actually go to Shraddha TV, and you'll find maybe a Shraddha TV live stream, and when you listen to they will chant the Ratana Sutra and these sorts of sutras, the 3 jewels and this and that. So that's what inspires me. But I don't really listen to a lot of new music, Sue. Older music, I like a lot of older music, 80s, 90s, 70s. V-Un Music, amazing content, much appreciated. I was raised Taoist/Buddhist with many friends of Hindu and indigenous lineages. I find comfort and great reminders here on your channel. Thank you, my friend. That means the world to me. Thank you. Kimberly, welcome. Travis, Mississippi in the house. Travis is another Patreon. Welcome, Trav. Art. I find it very meditational when I knit. Something easy, of course. I find it harder to sit and do nothing. Is that still helpful? Well, yes. I mean, knitting itself, the focus on the actual activity itself can be a meditation, right, Art? So that can be a meditation in and of itself. My mum was a knitter, and she would just sit on the couch all the time and just knit. She would have the TV on. Half the time, I don't even know if she was watching the TV. She was more focused on knitting, and she would make, she'd make blankets and all sorts of things. So I think it's a very relaxing practice, and I really like it because it's better than obviously sitting on the couch and sitting on the phone, right? Knitting, your mind is focused on a particular task, and you can kind of crowd out a lot of noise in doing that. With whatever, Jason, please post this live chat to your channel afterwards, as I would be very grateful. If I could review your response again, have you ever read For Uncle in the Mountain? Highly recommend to anyone. No, I haven't, but I thank you for recommending it. With this, the live chat will be up on exclusive to Patreon after this too. So for anyone who wants to become a patron of my channel, a member. Preston, you mentioned earlier that certain foods can stimulate your mind more than others. I haven't heard this before, so can you expand a little more on that? What kind of foods and their certain effects? Well, spicy foods, particularly, like overly spicy foods too. Don't get me wrong, I love spicy foods, but if you have like a really spicy masala dosa, for example. I had an experience in India where I ate at this place in Tiruvannamalai, and the dosa was just ridiculously hot. And it affects your sleep. It affects the next day of meditation, because you got to remember that there's a connection between your stomach and your brain, right? So sometimes, especially when you go to monasteries, the foods and ashrams, the foods are more plain, and they don't evoke a lot of, they don't stimulate the mind. So spicy foods can stimulate the mind, soft drinks, obviously coffee and caffeinated beverages in general will overly stimulate your mind, which will affect your equanimity and meditation. And so there are those, and there's a bunch of other ones. So like a lot of people will say eating a lot of meat the night before will affect your system as well. Sometimes a lot of rice, a lot of bread. So like I said, in ashrams and monasteries, usually the food is very bland. And, obviously the best foods can be, obviously vegetables. So like a salad and this and that. But I mentioned actually this in Emotional Intuition for Peak Performance, Preston, and also a little bit in Fasting the Mind about how foods affect our meditation practice. But I mean, not many people speak about it, but it's a no-brainer, yeah. Art, phew, thanks. I was too scared to ask you on Twitter. Yeah, that person reacted with a very low IQ. Thank you so much for your input. No doubt, Art. Thank you. Art, yes, doing guided meditation with you would be awesome. Thank you. Shraddha, yes. Kuan Yin, thank you. You're also in Australia, Kuan Yin. Can I ask whereabouts in Australia are you? Sterling, if we're allowed to gather in Australia in the future, an Eastern Australian retreat would be awesome. That is an idea. I've been toying with, Sterling. We'll toy with that a little bit, yeah. Preston, I'd love to do a meditation class with you. Thank you. Excellent. With whatever, what are your views on people channeling? Curious to hear your perspective on people channeling, say, in ET, entities from other dimensions, religious figures, gods within Hermeticism, etc. Any validity? I don't go anywhere near channeling with. I steer clear of a lot of that, and I think a lot of that has been misinterpreted when it went west and became a commodity. That's my honest opinions about it, because the ideas of channeling in the East is completely different from channeling in the West, where you don't channel entities in the East. I mean, it's more about channeling a certain power or energy as opposed to channeling like an entity and this and that. And I do know people who are actually professional channelers, and I knew some personally, and they openly were doing it to make money, and it was the people I knew, it was a scam. So you have to be very, very careful with a lot of that, yeah, because there's a lot of that, and there's a lot of people who are very gullible who fall for that, unfortunately, because most people are very innocent and just will believe if someone is telling them something like that. But in the end of the day, a lot of it is hocus pocus. So I would steer clear from it, because even if it was true, it's still a distraction from the spiritual path in the end of the day. Mick, thumbs up. Good to see you, Mick. Codigo Branco, thank you for answering my question about the difference between Buddhism and Taoism. I listened to the audiobooks and Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by Shunro Suzuki, and I found it kind of similar to Taoism. Yeah, that's it. Well, it is. Oh, you didn't know Buddhism had different styles, Codigo? Yeah, there are different branches. There's no doubt. Theravada is more linked to early Buddhism. It's the older Buddhism. Mahayana came later. Vajrayana came later. Vajrayana Buddhism is a mixture of Tibetan Bon and Mahayana Buddhism. Mahayana Buddhism was kind of an evolution out of Theravada Buddhism or early Buddhism, which was the main Buddhism within Nalanda University, which is the oldest university in the world in the Bihar area of India. And so that's where you had a big boom in the studies of consciousness, like through Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, these type of teachers, Buddhist teachers. And this is where you have the Madhyamaka schools and the Yogacara schools come from. So, and then in saying that, Zen Buddhism came later, but Zen Buddhism is still a branch of Mahayana Buddhism. I know that sounds a little really confusing, but that's actually the way it is. Yeah. So there are a lot of different branches, a lot of different sects, and yeah. So I'm glad you've really followed up with that, Codigo. It's actually something Guy Young and I have talked about on the podcast about traversing the actual evolution of Buddhism through Asia. Let me know if you guys would enjoy that sort of podcast. Codigo, again, thank you very much. Jason, I would really love to see your video about this topic if you'll make it. Thank you. I'd love to do it. Thank you for all the appreciation, Codigo. With whatever, thank you so much for your response, Jason. You are an absolute blessing for taking the time to deliver such detailed responses to all our questions. Thank you. It means a lot. It means a lot. With really glad to see you here today. People, there's 51 in the room, 81 thumbs up. Let's get it over 100, yeah? Let's get the thumbs up over 100. That'd be fun. Preston, I've been reading The Heart of the Buddhist Teachings by Thich Nhat Hanh, and at one part he talks about finding balance with your energies by spinning, but using the idea of spinning for balance. Preston, can you elaborate a little bit more on that? One of my favorite books, I don't know if you guys have read it, by Thich Nhat Hanh, is called Silence. And I think that this one book would be, if it was dispersed at a large scale, would be transformative for the entire world, particularly in a place like the US that seems to have a lot of, a lot of opinions flowing here and there. So I highly recommend the book Silence. I really love that book by Thich Nhat Hanh. It brings you down to the ground level, that book. It's a simple book. It's not a complicated scholarly book. Thich Nhat Hanh has a great style of writing. Art, I'm excited about your upcoming book, Spiritual Freedom in a Digital Age. I'm excited for you to read it, Art. Seriously. One day, I was thinking that maybe on one of these live streams, I may read a chapter to you guys from that book, if you don't mind. If you're not interested in that sort of thing, then we won't do it. We'll just keep doing the Q&A. But with whatever, Fourth Uncle in the Mountain was my book recommendation. My apologies for misspelling. No problem. Art, I look into your Patreon. I never done Patreon before. Thank you for consideration, Art. It's not that complicated, Patreon, but to be honest, even when I set up Patreon a few years ago, with anything new online, I always feel overwhelmed. That's what happens when you don't grow up with digital technology. Me, I tell people I'm analog, so. Matthew Joy, do you think there's a certain irony when certain spiritual teachers whose so-called purpose is to raise their conscious vibrations are charging thousands for their retreats and living extravagantly? Yes, Matthew, it is ironic. and you shouldn't be lost on the irony. But in saying that, you should also apply some discretion there as well, yeah? Because there are some teachers I know who do charge, but at the same time, they don't live that extravagantly, And actually, it's just a way for them to keep teaching. Yeah. So it's a way for them to make a living. But I know what you're saying. There are some other teachers out there who are living the high life, and they're charging an absolute fortune to attend their courses or whatnot. I mean, this is a common thing actually in entrepreneurship, right? Like you see a lot of entrepreneurs, like, for example, I think, like, I'm not saying Tony Robbins is a spiritual teacher, but I think to go to one of Tony Robbins' event, I think it's like $4,500 US. I mean, like, seriously. I mean, can't you just read one of his books? I mean, like, so I think that there is a limit to that. Yeah, there's a limit to how much, I personally don't really vibe with that. I mean, obviously we all need to make a living. Yeah, we all need to make a living. But one thing I liked what Gurdjieff said, I don't know who knows Gurdjieff here, but one thing I liked about what Gurdjieff said was he got criticized for charging money. Yeah, he wasn't charging, don't get me wrong. He wasn't charging lots of money. But the reason why he charged money to listen to him speak was because he found that when he had an open forum, he would often attract the wrong people. YouTube, right? So often with YouTube, as I said to you guys before, most of you guys, 99% are wonderful, and you're here for the right reasons, and you're kind and you're courteous, and you have your faculties together. But there's a small minority who don't, right? And so they will speak poorly to other people, and so forth and so on. So Gurdjieff tried to avoid that back in the day because he had open forums and there were problems. So he started charging because he knew that if people were really sincere about learning this knowledge, they would actually pay for it. And personally, back in the day, I would pay anything to learn this knowledge. Not that I paid for any retreats and this and that, because I went to monasteries and ashrams and so forth, which are free. But as in books and this and that, there was no, I would buy, if it was a book I needed, I wouldn't care about the price, for example. And so Gurdjieff kind of came from that mentality that if you're really sincere about this, then you would pay, obviously within reason, you would pay some money. Yeah. But he was also mindful in saying that in an ideal world, I wouldn't have to charge this money. But it was almost like a safeguard from the crazies, so to speak, for him. So I think some teachers, Matthew, do it for that reason, as Gurdjieff did, but other teachers, as you're pointing out, they take liberty with that kind of perspective. Yeah. Oh, Music Dragon in the house. Good to see you. Always good to see you, Music Dragon. Hi, Jason. Just wanted to say hello and thanks for sharing your expertise. Much love. Thank you for the appreciation and the support, Music Dragon. Yes, a podcast on the different streams of Buddhism and their emergence in time would be great. Thank you. Thank you, Art. That actually we will consider that then, yeah. It's really, I think, an important topic. A lot of people always ask me about the evolution of spirituality in Asia, which is, the teachings of spirituality in Asia are my expertise, but also the evolution of the traditions I'm really interested in, the actual history of the traditions, even going way back to Indus Valley and Harappa and, the Mohenjo-daro and all of these ancient Vedic cultures. So, Miss Zen, you'd love to see that too. Thank you, Miss Zen. Kuan Yin, you're in North Queensland, the Whitsunday region. Wow. Bowen, Kuan Yin, I was born in Mackay. I know Bowen very well. That's awesome. North Queensland in the house. My sister, Kuan Yin, used to live in Townsville, and my aunties and uncles. So when I was young, my mum and dad would drive from Mackay to Townsville, and we would always stop at Bowen on the way for lunch. I never stayed in Bowen long term. With whatever, wonderful response to channeling. Jason, thank you. I agree entirely with you, but just wanted to hear your thoughts as I remain skeptical of people who claim to do such things. Stay the spiritual path. That's right. That's right with Stay the spiritual path. As I said, I knew one individual who actually openly said to me it was a show. It was theatrics. So, I mean, I'm not going to out that person, but make of it what you will. Yeah. Sometimes making money can take precedence over having dignity and integrity. So, Art, I'm analog too. Yes, Art, 100% analog. I do my best on here. Yeah. Greg Gardenia, favorite live stream, Jason. Greg, thank you for being with us. Cameron Tobin, I was going to thank you for being a bodhisattva, but I recently learned I should be thanking you for being a jivan mukta. Same to you, Cameron. Same to you. Did you watch, Cameron, did you watch the video on the bodhisattva versus jivan mukta that I made a couple of years ago? I can't remember when I made it. I'm also interested in Hinayana Buddhism. Yes, very interested. For those who don't know, Hinayana Buddhism is Theravada Buddhism. And my relationship with Theravada Buddhism goes back a long way. From the days when I was younger in Thailand, and you know, my affection towards India and Sri Lanka, these places. And there's something very austere about Hinayana Theravada Buddhism, something very grounded, and it doesn't, there's a beauty to it. In the simplicity, there's a beauty in it. For those who don't know, you know, so there's one book called Theravada Buddhism, which I highly recommend. It's probably a bit more expensive. It's a scholarly book, and it's from Robert Gombrich, and he's one of the great scholars on Buddhism, and I highly recommend that book for you guys. With whatever, by the way, you give the best book recommendations. I also love every book you have written and can't wait to dig into your new work soon. Can't express it enough how happy your work makes me feel. Thank you very much. Wow, it's music to my ears, my friend. Like I always tell you guys, this community chokes me up sometimes about how you know, kind and serious you guys are about this work, and that what I'm doing here, there are actually people who are actually really serious about Eastern spirituality, which is just, you know, it means a lot to me. Yeah, it means a lot. I thought when I actually, because I only just used to write articles and do books, that when I started this YouTube channel, that I thought, surely there's no one out there that likes this sort of is interested in this material, but thankfully there are. And I'm glad you like my book recommendations. Guys, let me know if you would like to see more videos on books that I recommend, because I can do more books on that too, you know. So what do we got here? Christian, can you go into how you use Wu Wei in your life and how you overcome resistance to doing tasks? Well, it's different, Christian, because it's been a long time. So I don't really. The thing is, I don't overthink it. Yeah, I know that that's kind of a. It used to be just a Western habit, but it's becoming a modern habit. But I don't tend to overthink what I do. Yeah. So, like for example, I began chapter 5 of my new book this week, right? And so I don't really feel any resistance. I just sit down, I write. I don't overthink it. I don't overthink the actual task. Obviously, what I'm doing, I'm engaged with what I'm doing, but there's a sense of so-called effortlessness there, because for a long period of time, the writing and creating YouTube and talking to you guys about this stuff, it's just second nature for me. It's not anything I have to really think about. I think that maybe if you have to overthink something, then that implies maybe it's not your thing. Yeah, maybe it's not your thing. If there's a lot of resistance there, then maybe that's really not what your so-called Li is, your organic pattern. Though in saying that, sometimes there is resistance, but you can overcome that through, if you just put the effort in something. And here we're talking about effort as opposed to non-effort, but some effort then to make it effortless, right? I always use analogies in like sport or music for this, because, for example, to become a great basketballer, basketball itself is not a natural thing. To bounce a ball and to jump and dunk and to shoot, these are all unnatural movements, but with training, they become effortless, right? And so sometimes you have to approach things like that as well. You can't just totally think about wu-wei in the sense of non-doing. You also need to think about it in sense of non-deliberate doing or effortless action. Yeah. So it's how to act spontaneously with the terrain around you. Yeah. So in overcoming resistance for myself is I don't really have lots of resistance in the tasks that I do. Yeah. Maybe if I'm doing my taxes, doing my taxes, but then you have to kind of doing something as mundane as your taxes, you have to kind of, come to that with a certain level of calm, even though there may be a certain level of anxiety just to do that, because there's a lot of like maths and it's very analytical to sort those sorts of things out. But once you balance yourself and you come back to a bit of equanimity, then you can approach any situation efficaciously. That's the point, Christian. The thing is that, and this goes back to the earlier discussion about martial arts, is that if you have a certain level of equanimity, you can react to the situations in an appropriate manner, without resistance. We often have resistance because resistance sometimes arises from avoidance. So we know we have to do the taxes, right? But we're trying to avoid the taxes, which creates more resistance. It's a very yin and yang martial arts perspective of how to approach life. So we have to really unpack how much we are trying to avoid a situation which is creating the resistance. Oh, that's how you learn, Cameron. That's how I learned the distinction between two. That's awesome. So glad you've watched that. Bruce, what do you think about Muji? I learned a lot from Muji when I was younger. Yeah, like I tell people, I was at satsang when I was younger with Muji, back when it was a bit more pure, when people who were more serious were at satsang, and in Tiruvannamalai here. So it had not kind of become a big thing in Europe at that time. It was more pure, and it was closer to the actual tradition of Advaita Vedanta back in that time. I can't say much about what Muji does these days, and I don't want to speak negatively about it, but it's become a whole different thing. I don't even know, because if I ever watch anything from Muji, I watch a channel called Satsang with Muji, which is not Muji's channel. And it's the satsangs from, it was probably run by him and his team back in the day, but it's a channel back from around 2008 to 2011. So in the early years, the good years, where it was more sincere and there was more people who were really interested in Advaita Vedanta. And Muji probably wasn't adapting to an audience that is not familiar with these subjects. So, yeah. Matthew, thanks for answering my question, and just wanted to thank you for spreading the wisdom as well. Your Taoist documentary series is what first put me in touch with Taoism. Haven't looked back since. Matthew, music to my ears. Thank you, my friend. It means a lot. Guy Broseph. Hi, Jason. Been really enjoying your videos. Really appreciate you and your work. Guy, thank you, my friend. Means a lot, my friend. Thank you. Welcome. Bruce, Canada, in the house. Bruce, where in Canada are you from? Montreal, Toronto, Edmonton, Calgary, Newfoundland? Travis, I would love to hear a chapter of your your book. I finished I Am That. Have just started Be As You Are. I'm practicing self-inquiry daily, feeling more peaceful, liberated, and strange every day. Trav, that's awesome, man. Thank you. I'm so happy you finished I Am That. And man, you go from one to the other. Yeah, Be As You Are. Doing some heavy lifting. Awesome. I love it. It really brings music to my ears when I see people, really diving deep into this knowledge. Because I know personally, if you're sincere and you dive deeper into this knowledge, you're not only going to liberate yourself, but you'll also become a better person for other people in the world. You know what I mean? Like you become much more of a peaceful person, more calm, and have a level of intelligence that's grounded. Yeah, and we need that in the world these days. Art, yes, please make more videos on book recommendations. Your book recommendations are great. All right, Art. Looks like I better get to work. With whatever, I know you're too humble to admit, but I have not come across anyone as knowledgeable as you on Eastern spirituality, and the way in which you share it with the world is the work of a sage, my friend. Thank you. It means a lot. It means a lot. Look, I try to just be myself. Yeah. I try to be as genuine as possible and not put on any show. And I think a lot of people, when they come across Eastern spirituality, Westerners in particular, they think they need to make it something. Yeah. So they'll dress a certain way, they will speak a certain way. And that's kind of not how it is. If you go to India or Southeast Asia or China and this and that, and people who are really invested in the traditions, they still speak like an ordinary person, and they still have their so-called idiosyncrasies and their character and that, which actually makes people trust them more. Yeah. When you're putting on an image in a show, we have something within us. Our intuition says, I don't know if I can trust this guy because he's putting on a show and doesn't seem genuine. Yeah. So, and I think that's how we are. And maybe that's what you feel from me with, maybe because I don't put on the show and, I wouldn't feel comfortable in dressing up a certain way and walking around like this and pretending to be to be someone I'm not, right? So all right, great questions, guys. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. Music Dragon, resistance is futile. No doubt. Bruce, Saskatchewan. Also awesome. Have a small farm with horses. Bruce, beautiful. I bet you it's a beautiful place to live, my friend. Canada, I mean, come on. Linda, is it Linda? What you are saying now, can the non-effort come from actually experience? Usually beginners tend to think more. I am looking at something that you are learning, something new. Yeah, it can happen from, that's a good point. When you come across new things and this and that, you tend to think more, you tend to analyze, you tend to try to come to some sort of conclusion. That can also come from the Western cognition as well. There's a funny thing, especially what I encountered in India. When Indians first come across this knowledge, for example, if they come across the Upanishads, they don't tend to overly think it because they accept the knowledge. And one of the things I think, people ask me why I learn as much as I have, is because I never really came with a mentality that I sort of, knew about anything, right? So I accepted the knowledge as it is and actually accepted the authority of the knowledge. Because of the history and how long it's been around. And I mean, there's a lot more into it as well, like experiences that I've had and so forth and so on. But that's a big thing, right? Is to accept the knowledge as it is without overthinking about it. It's like For example, if you want to learn the violin, you can't debate whether doing scales is going to help you become a good violinist. You need to do scales. The professionals still do scales. It's how it is. And so we have to approach also Eastern spirituality the same. Yeah. These traditions have been around for thousands and thousands of years. Not because they're not true, not because it's something that's, a fad or something that is like a cultural, it's not part of a cultural zeitgeist. It's just they're forever there, So, but non-experience can come, in a sense from actually experiencing it. It can, and it does, It just depends on, again, not overthinking, and just putting the effort in. That leads to what they call being in the zone, right? Sport is a great example of that, Linda, is that the effort you put in can help you to be in the zone, be in wu-wei. This is a big problem, right? Because like even Zhuangzi would say, how do I get into the zone? How do I overcome? I mean, if I'm not in wu-wei, how do I actually, how do I get into wu-wei if it is requiring effort? And then some, like a coach of a basketball team, like I use basketball for example, would say you just have to put some effort in to do, and then in the doing, it leads to non-doing. There's a little bit of truth to that. And for those who play sport or as a writer, I know that personally as well. But what happens is the more that you do that, the more it becomes, you don't require effort at the start. Shyam, what is the relation of stomach and higher mind and above and lower centrus in the body / spiritual body, and why are lower considered bad or evil? Can you give me more context to that question, Shyam? That's kind of open-ended and yes, music dragon. Horses are magnificent creatures. Beautiful creatures. Love them. Preston, what do you think is an important question someone should ask when on the path? That's an interesting question, Preston. What is an important question? Well, the most fundamental question is, what am I? Is the most fundamental question, right? Is what am I? But probably on the path, because to answer the question, what am I can give you the answer. But if there's no context and if you don't have any understanding, then that will just mean nothing to you. So a more important question is how did I become this self? How did I become this ego? Or what's the nature of this ego that sees the world in a fragmented manner, sees the world of duality and separation? These are the bigger questions and the more important questions that we probably should ask about ourselves or a teacher. Seb, Canada, just outside Ottawa for me, on a homestead. Awesome. We got a lot of Canadians in the house today here. That's awesome. Miss Sen, does your screen indicate that there is an error? The video stopped. Did it stop? Or is it, am I on live now? It does indicate, but it's, all right. I think I'm still on. Just people here. Remember, guys, give us a thumbs up. We're almost at 100 likes. We're at 95. Give a little tickle. Christian, thanks for answering my questions. Quick questions. Hopefully, what does liberation mean? What is your definition of spirituality? And better source of knowledge, videos, or books in spirituality. Liberation is liberation from the persona, Christian, the identity that we believe we are. Yeah. So moksha is the release of that. In Sanskrit, moksha is a release. And even if we look at nirvana in Buddhism, nirvana is the blowing out of a candle. So meaning the complete dissolution of self. Not that you don't exist, but what you truly are will come to the fore. Yeah. So the undifferentiated state of consciousness. So it's liberation from the identity and also liberation from suffering, because we suffer because of this identity. Yeah. We suffer because of our own world view. In Sanskrit, this is called Brahmanda. Now, Brahmanda is a subjective reality we all live in. And Brahmanda is a construct. Now, Maya, the illusion of reality, which we could say comes from the root word marta, which means measurement, is actually a better translation. It's not illusion, but construction for Maya. So Maya is this constructed reality that we develop from measuring this and that, as I mentioned earlier, which creates Brahmanda, the subjective reality, the mask that we are. And so we have to, to use Hindu terminology, Shiva is the destroyer, but we could translate that as the deconstructor of reality. So Shiva deconstructs Brahmanda, the construction of Maya. So we have to liberate ourselves from the Brahmanda, from the subjective reality, to experience the to be honest, there is no separation. It's all one. That's the fundamental reality. The Brahman, the Tao, is an ultimate reality of oneness, wholeness that we can experience when we get out of this sense of I, as the doer, as the thinker, as the one who likes this, likes that, has opinions on this and that. It's the complete dissolution of that. So that's what liberation is, if that makes any sense. Ms. Zen, I understand that in martial arts, they focus on dantian or hara. It would be like a second brain. Is this very important? Yes, it is. It is very important. The dantian is very important in spiritual from a Taoist perspective and spiritual cultivation. And you can also relate, the dantian to different traditions as well, the hara. And so you have the upper dantian as well, obviously, in spiritually oriented martial arts. And like we can have and you would know this, that you can have a feeling of how important the actual lower dantian, in some sense, can be more important than the upper dantian when we do breathing exercises, right? When we do deep breathing exercises, you can feel the energy in the lower dantian affecting the psychological state of the upper dantian. I mean, there's a lot more to it than that. And also, if we look at it from the nervous system perspective, the dantian is part of the enteric nervous system. Yeah, the enteric nervous system. So, which is very interesting. With whatever, you are genuine, I know it. Thank you. If you could explain what is happening when we dream during sleep, I would be super grateful. How is it that people have such real dreams, premonitions? What about deja vu? Yeah, it's interesting. There's so much information on dreams with deja vu is a strange one too. Deja vu is almost like the way that I was told by a teacher earlier in my life was it's like remembering the future. Remembering the future is what they say. Yeah. So, which is kind of a strange thing. Yeah. Remembering the future. But so we have that. But deja vu can also be related to the samskaras, because what happens is you have a sensation of something's going to happen, right? Or a sensation of like you've done this before. And you have, in a sense, according to your samskaras, but the situation is not identical. It's not identical. It's a feeling that you've done it before, but it's a past impression that is being evoked. But it's not exactly the same thing, right? Like, so for example, you and I could be in a room and I could have opened the door a certain way, and that evokes a sense of deja vu, like this has happened before, but that same situation may have happened in a different place, a different time, with a different person, that created the sense of deja vu, which was the seed of the future deja vu. So there's two ways to look at it, right? It's like remembering the future, like it's like a premonition, or it's related to the samskaras. Now, the way I look at that is that you can think about that either or, but I don't want to say it's either or, you know what I mean? Like, I think both are valid, actually. And the idea of real dreams is a really, really interesting one too. Are you talking also about lucid dreams here? Like, what do you mean with? Are you just talking about the actual sensation of the dream feeling real? Guys, 97 likes. Give us a thumbs up. Linda, thank you for your answering. Linda, thank you. Thank you for being here. Kuan Yin, that's wonderful. Would you visit North Queensland again? I'm from Bowen. Looking to move from here eventually. Interested in moving down southways. More opportunities than a small town. Yeah, for sure. Well, you know, when I was younger, Kuan Yin, I moved from Mackay to Melbourne, and then Melbourne to Sydney, and then Sydney to Asia. So that was kind of my trajectory in life. And yes, there are more opportunities in the cities in Australia, for sure. Would I visit North Queensland again? Of course. I have not been back to North Queensland since 2006. I've told you guys before that both my mother and father have passed away. So 2006 was when my father passed away. So that was the last time I actually visited. And so I just have had no reason really to go back there. I have a brother who still lives there, but I just haven't had unless you call, he is a reason, but I haven't been back. Bruce, thank you. Joe Truck, thank you, my friend. Narayan Lakshmi, we are not the material body. Well, we're not fundamentally, but relatively, yes. Absolutely not. Relatively, yes. It's a far more complex and nuanced conversation. Matthew, when we try to come away from rigid thoughts, actions, controls, goals, materialism, etc., does this in some way deny the other half of reality? And are we in fact being too rigid, dualistic in our own way? When we try to come away, well, it depends on if you're trying, Matthew. That's the thing. If it's a natural process, you feel the nature in it, and it's not sort of an effort, then it can seem contradictory, right? But at the same time, we don't want to, again, I harp on about it on all of these live streams. We don't want to overthink. We got to stop overthinking. The thing is, as I mentioned earlier, is that our nature has been warped by the socialization project. And it doesn't matter what it is. Let's just call it the socialization project. Our nature has been warped. And so we can either keep going down that road, or we can realize that our nature has been warped and try to, in some sense, recorrect our direction and return to our nature, which may imply a little bit of effort and may imply, a view that is wrong, so to speak, and this is the right way. But you don't want to overthink that. Yeah, you don't want to overthink it. You want to just realize that you were trying to live a life that was out of accord with nature, and you need to live back in accord with nature. And sometimes that requires to redirect your course, yeah, as opposed to, overly thinking about. This is what a lot of spiritual people do, right? They overly think about, but that if I'm desiring not to desire, that's still a desire. And they get in all this analytical game. And you don't want to see, an Easterner would not think like that. So, okay, we should not have desires. Okay, we can say then we are desiring not to desire, right? Okay. But I mean, seriously, like, you have to call a spade sometimes. That realization that the desire, not to desire, still a desire, can come later, but you need to redirect your course. That's just, it's fundamental. You need to redirect your course. Guys, I'm just going to go and get some water, and I'll come back in 1 second. I've got 99 likes in the room. Let's get it over 100, and I'll come back and I'll answer all the questions. $101 likes. There you go. Let's have a look. Bruce, perfect sense, but how do you totally drop the ego? Well, like I said, with the Dattatreya tradition, Bruce, it's you have to really put the ego into the fire. You have to practice self-inquiry to its nth degree. And to totally drop the ego means that you're not possessed by the ego anymore. You still have an interface with reality. Like, the thing is that you still typing to me in the chat box, right? I'm still conversing with you. This is like an ego interface. We're using our persona system to communicate and convey deeper understandings and contemplations. But we are not possessed by that ego, right? So you can say that that essentially has dropped the ego, because if you were the ego totally, then you would be opinionated, you would have this view, that view, you would disagree with this guy, you'd be trolling online, you'd be doing all of these things. And so we're not doing that, right? So the thing is that why I mentioned the Dattatreya tradition earlier is because it puts the dissolution of the self as on fire. So you're not reacting to the sense of I at all, ever. Like, and this is why a lot of people who follow the Dattatreya tradition and become avadhuts, they move away from the world and they go to the forest and so forth and so on. That can be for some people. You know, we all have different aptitudes for different understandings, Eastern spirituality, which I try to let you guys know all the time. And so that's, should be our focus, right? Like, is dropping the ego, but understanding in a sense that you need still to converse with the world and this and that, which implies, to a certain degree that, okay, the ego is still there, but it's purified of its opinions and it's functioning as it's supposed to, as an interface. So you could say then, okay, then that's not the ego, right? Okay, technically not. But if you're talking about it's like you're still interfacing and you're still using your name and, blah, 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 then, I know how people can get. They overthink and they're so technical. That's still the ego, right? And it's like, oh, okay. But it's not the ego in the stereotypical sense that we're thinking about it. Like, it's not full of views and full of conditioning. Once you get rid of the conditioning and you cleanse the ego, then it just becomes an interface. It's useful as a tool, but it's not who you are. Kuan Yin, book recommendations, please. All right, Kuan Yin, noted. Preston, thank you for your answers today. I appreciate you and everyone's great questions that I wouldn't have thought to ask. Preston, love you, my friend. Thank you. Always good to see you. Oh, big man Tate in the house. Tate, how are you? Good to see you. No, it's almost over, but you made it. You made it. I might do another 20 minutes or so because you guys are awesome. 6574. Are there like laws or SMT in Taoism, like do not murder, or like Panchasila of like Panchasila of Buddhism? The thing is, in Taoism think about it similarly, but they try to look at the core of what, in some sense, breeds a murderer. For example, I mean, Buddhism obviously look at that as well, but Taoism looks at how to breed a murderer, right? Like, so when we talk about things about right or wrong and morality and this and that, having rules and regulations themselves can produce, as Lao Tzu points out in the Tao Te Ching, can produce its opposite. So when you put a rule on thou shalt not steal, you produce thieves. And we've seen this all throughout history, right? So when you tighten the grip on individuals with rules and regulations, and you have a society that is hierarchical and based on superiority, then you're going to produce, the people that you don't want to produce. Does that mean we should not have law and order? Taoism are not saying that we should not have law and order. It just means that the law and order is based on nature. It's not based on an artificial system or an external system of knowledge. As we see, like, because as I mentioned earlier to you guys, Taoism contextually, from a historical sense, was a critique of Confucianism. So Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi are both pointing out the hypocrisy and falsity of Confucius forging these rules and regulations on people, which ironically are creating thieves and creating people who are falling out of accord with the Confucian way. And it's a psychological thing, right? We see this, and we've probably all experienced it. Don't do this, but then you go and do it when you're younger, and so forth and so on, right? It's more nuanced than that, obviously, but Taoism are looking at from the sense of how do we produce murderers? How do we produce people who are unhealthy and insane? And the crux of the matter, according to Taoism, is socialization, is an external system that tries to change our nature to accord to the system's perspective of how we should be. And this is why Lao Tzu recommends for us to live a simple life, away from, in some sense, society, so that we can come back into harmony with our true nature, our true self, which is not an accumulative sense of self. It's not a sense of persona or identity that is lasting. It's temporary. It's a creation. You yourself, in your deep down essence, are the Tao, which is nature, a part of nature, and your fundamental state of mind is stillness. Once we move out of that and we create rules, regulations, society, cultures, religions, and so forth and so on, then we're trying to mold the individual a certain way, which doesn't accord to each and every individual. So certain individuals have different aptitudes for certain things. Some people have a high tolerance for stress. Other people don't. Now, I'm not in any way excusing murderers or anyone who breaks the law, but I'm saying that if we look at, sometimes if we have a psychological test on some of those individuals, they may have had a low tolerance to stress, a low tolerance to being told what to do, so forth and so on, and a low tolerance for people, doing the wrong thing, for example. And so then they go out and do the wrong thing, and so forth and so on. It's an infinite regress, So it is it's a larger conversation, but I try to address that a lot in my the podcast on amorality with Guy Young, and I also have a few videos on Taoism amorality. Tate, you're the 100th like. Awesome. Perfect timing. CEB, suffering from our own identity, our identity made from the social fabric, went from reading the psychoanalyst Judith Butler to you today. Uncanny. Thank you, Seb. Thank you for being there. You guys are awesome, man. Keep it coming. Like I said, remember that this live stream is going to disappear probably an hour after the fact, and it'll only be exclusive on Patreon. So for those who want to join my Patreon as a member, I have a lot of exclusive content, a lot of in-depth inside scoops on what's happening with the podcasts and my work and documentaries and that. So I try to keep it fun for those who are patrons. With whatever, yes, lucid dreams and astral projection included. Curious as to your perspective. Also, dreams that foretell of a real life event or a dead relative visits, as I have heard many stories of this occurring. Yeah, this is interesting. It's really interesting. The astral project. See, the thing is, I'm not so much lucid dreams. I have knowledge in because of Tibetan Buddhism, Vajrayana Buddhism, and Bon, which they focus a lot on lucid dreams. Actually, Alan Wallace talks a lot about lucid dreams as a spiritual practice, actually, and the ability to actually get into lucid dreams, this and that. I've never been overly interested in that personally. Astral projection, I keep a big distance from, because I think astral projection kind of falls into the category of channeling a lot, and can be, what do we say? It can be warped according to whoever is so-called teaching this, who is teaching astral projection. But dreams that foretell of real life events, dead relatives, etc. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, it's almost like a sense of deja vu within the dream, isn't it? Like it's foretelling or remembering the future within the dream state of consciousness, which again goes to show the Vedantic perspective of the waking, dreaming, and deep dreamless sleep states of consciousness are all actually interrelated in some sense, and all kind of like the boundaries are not so solid, they're more porous, as in anything, right? So we should know that, but a lot of people don't know that, right? A lot of people don't know that the boundaries between those three are porous. So which makes me believe that we encounter deja vu within our dreams. We have a sense of remembering the future, but again, why these happen and this and that again is not something that I could probably elaborate on. I mean, and I don't know if anyone really could do that. I remember when my mother passed away, my father would have a lot of dreams and also visions of mum, and so who knows why, right? Maybe it might have been just a psychological state my father was in, because he was so distraught once my mother had passed away. Maybe he was seeing what he wanted to see. Maybe he was having her visiting him dreams. Maybe it was just a dream, but it felt real. And I mean, it's hard to really know, isn't it? Like, unless you're a real, well, even if I know people who are fully into analyzing dreams who can't really come to any sort of solid conclusion on that, because it just becomes a subjective opinion, and and so kind of like we're just intuitively trying to explain that sort of stuff. So Let's have a look here. Tate, how does Taoism speak of things like romantic relationships, soulmates, twin flames? Doesn't really speak anything much about it, Tate. It just speaks about more in the sense that if you are, you know, relationships are like anything, right, in nature, right? They blossom, they bloom. If you nurture them like any plant, they continue to grow. And Lao Tzu doesn't really mention, and Zhuangzi don't really mention anything about soulmates and things like this. They would look at relationships in the sense of just as a part and parcel with reality itself, right? Like you're experiencing reality, and in experiencing nature and reality, we often come across people or things or events that we resonate with, or that we feel like we have an intimate connection with, almost as if it's like a mirror in some sense, right? So, and I think that's how that they would probably think about relationships themselves. It's more about a resonance you have with another individual, that is deeper than the superficial, right? There's a connection there, in some sense, like sometimes through the eyes, right? Like a lot of the times that we have an intimate connection with another individual is not, in some sense, not just through the eyes and as in the sense of lust. It's more in sense of like a deeper resonance and connection that we have to maybe that individual, which we've all probably experienced, right? And so, yeah, like I said, they don't really have anything to say much on twin flames or soulmates. It's more so about, romantic relationships and those sorts of things are just part of nature. It's just part of the way the world is. With whatever, any suggestions as to where one should start to begin learning Hatha Yoga? Extremely grateful for you, Jason. Thank you, With. Start to learn Hatha Yoga. Well, I was going to say, look, to be honest, Isha Foundation is not a bad place to start to learn Hatha Yoga with Sadhguru. But in saying that, if you go to India, there's a load of Hatha Yoga schools. I would say, now, be careful with this. I would say go to Rishikesh. Now, if you're going to Rishikesh, you've got to be careful because there's a bunch of fake yogis, fake schools that are designed just to, get girls and so forth and so on. So, I mean, that's all around the world, right? But if you go to Rishikesh, you will know the sincere schools. You will know the sincere yogis and learn directly from them. Now, in saying that, I've had a few friends who have gone to Rishikesh and have gone on vision quests. So now what I mean by vision quests is that they will meet a yogi in somewhere like Rishikesh or Dehradun or somewhere especially in Uttarakhand in the north, and they will disappear with the yogi for months in the forest. Crazy, right? Like, but that's how it used to be back in the old days. And so I saw one guy once. I was on the Ganga meditating, and I was just sitting there after a while, and then out of the bush came a yogi and a European gentleman, and he was, wow, he's weathered, like bony, massive beard, hadn't had a shower, and I mean, he must have been gone for, I would say, probably 6 months to 8 months, probably something like this. But he went on a proper vision quest, a proper traditional yogic initiation into Hatha Yoga and yogic philosophy. So, not that I recommend that for everyone, but that's some of the options you have in a place like Uttarakhand and around Rishikesh. But what's probably better and more pleasant for all of us is if you go to Rishikesh, you find a good school. There's a lot of good food in Rishikesh, a lot of health. The environment, the Ganga's beautiful, and your mind will just be shanti. Yeah, you practice Hatha Yoga, study yogi yoga philosophy all day. Shanti, shanti. And mind you, if you go to Rishikesh, I highly recommend that you go to see Swami Atmanananda. Amazing. Swami Atmanananda, he's a German heritage, but he studied Vedanta for, I don't know, 30, 40 years under masters up in Uttarakhand. His master actually lives not far from Dehradun. And like he's an amazing teacher. And the name of his monastery is Ajata Ashram, I think. I have to try to remember, but anyway, you can search Swami Atmanananda. Yeah, he's brilliant. So there are other options up in Rishikesh, but like you can actually study hatha yoga and go and sit at satsang with Swami Atmanananda. Best of both worlds, yeah. Let's have a look. Tate, good to see you live. Glad you remembered me. I always remember, brother. Thank you for being there. Zora, we need the ego to work for us. Yeah, it should be our slave, not our master, shouldn't it? Travis, little off our normal subject, but what are your thoughts on hypnosis? Hypnotists claim they access the subconscious. Could they actually access and cleanse our samskaras? I don't really know about cleansing this. They can cleanse the samskaras, Trav. They can obviously. I don't know who's ever done hypnotherapy. I've done hypnotherapy 4 times in the past, if you can believe that. But it was like 15 years ago, something like this. And it was only from curiosity. And actually, I knew a guy in Sydney who is he's a professional hypnotherapist. Like he does it medically. Like it's not like, it's not like the stage performers and all this and that. And so I was easy. I went into hypnotherapy very easy. Like it was, and what I learned from that is that it can train certain new behaviors and attitudes in you. So the thing is that they don't really cleanse the samskaras. What they do is they retrain probably certain vasanas, certain habits that you have about a certain problem you may have, which will retrain the samskaras. Won't cleanse them, but it will retrain it, for example. Yeah. So for example, if you had a confidence problem and you are afraid of public speaking, then they could go in there and tinker with that fear. And it's not that maybe that the fear has subsided, but your attitude and your behavior towards that has changed. And so the fear then doesn't arise. So hypnotherapy is real in that sense, but not real in the sense that you can cleanse their subconscious. I don't think that that's entirely possible. Because first of all, Trav, as you know, you would have to, the hypnotherapist would have to know a lot about you to do that. Yeah, they have to know a lot about you. Yeah, past experiences, future fears, relationships, what your dad did to you when you were 7. Like you go on and on, right? So 6574, thank you for answering. Thank you 65. Kuan Yin, thank you for answering. Much appreciated. Love it. Bowen in the house. Kuan Yin, have you ever read Ikigai? Ikigai is the Japanese philosophy, right? Tell me if I'm wrong about that. Brushstroke, do you also enjoy law of attraction? No, do I enjoy it? I speak about brushstroke. I speak about law of attraction in my book, The Science and Practice of Humility. And I highlight the fact that a lot of what the law of attraction has become is fueled with the ego. So when we look at it from a deeper spiritual perspective, it's our ego that wants certain things, right? And so Eastern spirituality is about getting out of that desire, that want to need that, right? That desire. And so law of attraction, as I mentioned in Science and Practice of Humility, is actually a New Age interpretation of mental alchemy within Hermeticism. And I know a lot of books like The Secret and that back in the day mentioned Thoth, but they didn't mention the actual tradition of Hermeticism and what mental alchemy actually is. And there's a lot to go into when we talk about mental alchemy. And like even if you look at the term alchemy, right, which comes from alchemia, which means to fuse with the ultimate reality, to fuse with God, if you will. And so you have to think also about you have to get out of that sense of need and desire, and not need, of want and desire, which is what the law of attraction, this day and age is basically built on. Yeah. I want money. I want this car. I want this house. And it's all from the ego. So Eastern spirituality is about the dissolution of that. And then the irony is, according to mental alchemy, is the more you downregulate your sense of self, the more you align with these higher energies, and then you begin to get what you need as opposed to what you want and what you desire. Yeah. Got some good questions. Keep going, people. Thank you. We got 103 likes. Really good. Give us a thumbs up if you haven't given us a thumbs up. Let's get to 110. 110. I'll pop off in about 10 minutes, people. So let's try and end this with some fireworks. All right, let's have a look. With whatever. Sorry for my vague questions. Just love hearing your take on these topics from the Eastern spiritual perspective. Your answers are incredible as always. Thank you, With. Thank you. People, I can't see every question too, yeah? I have this individual, Tashi, who's got emotional. Man, I waited and you skipped my question. Way to go. Never attending again. That's okay, Tashi. You don't have to attend. Your question didn't pop up. Sorry about that. Remember, I'm a stranger and you are a stranger. I respect you, and hopefully that you respect strangers in the future, yeah? So please speak with common courtesy. If the questions get missed, it's because there's so many questions and it's hard to see all of them, yeah? So please behave yourself in the future. And also, I'm not going to be too concerned if you don't attend it again, because if you're going to be rude like that, then Eastern spirituality is not for you. Work on manners and common courtesy first, and then come into deeper topics. All right. So Guy Bros Beef. Yes, Guy Broseph. Awesome. Any ideas on an ideal diet in Taoism regarding specifically raw foods being closest to Tao? How much should we go by intrinsic intuition versus learned concepts or ethical concerns? In relation to diet, Guy? I'm assuming in relation to diet. Taoism don't make a sort of a moral stance on diet. They say follow what is natural, yeah? So what is natural according to Taoism is what is natural, obviously. So natural foods, but they don't also exclude animal products, yeah? They don't exclude that. But they would have a problem definitely with industrialized farming and so forth and so on. But back in the day, that didn't exist, yeah? back in the day, if Lao Tzu's out in his yard with a couple of chickens, that's what he's got. He's got a couple of chickens, probably got a cow over there, gives him some milk. And so it's more about sticking to what is natural, not processed foods, not any like fast foods, junk food, and this and that. More about like making your own food, sticking to more vegetables, minimal fruit, like you don't have too much sugar, and all of these things that will actually enhance your spiritual practice and enhance your equanimity. Yeah, enhance your equanimity. So sometimes like a lot of spicy food, if you have too much meat in your diet, this can also contribute to problems with your thinking. Yeah, because it can stimulate your mind too much. We spoke about this earlier, which then can affect your equanimity and your spiritual practice. So I would say, try to have a moderate diet. I eat only 2 meals a day. Like I'll eat after this because it's lunchtime now, but I never eat breakfast. I'll eat breakfast maybe if I'm traveling, because obviously when you're traveling, you got to be real. You can get pretty tired when you're traveling. So you got to keep it natural. Reduce the amount of food. It's more about like the quantity. Obviously, it's a balance between the quality and the quantity of the food that you eat. Yeah. So you got to try and avoid a lot of junk food, avoid a lot of sugars, a lot of heavy carbs. There's nothing wrong with fat. A lot of people, are realizing that this day and age, like fat is actually good, but you can get fat from vegetables and that as well. Like it's not like you just have to get it from meat. So to be closest to the Tao is just to follow the way of nature, yeah, to follow the natural foods, and to live that way, not to, again, even like you said, with learned concepts and ethical concerns, even like the idea of vegetarianism and veganism can lead into people being very overly moralistic, and they can undermine people who do eat meat, right? Like, so we still have to think at the end of the day, 94% of the world still eat animal products. It's not like it's not anything new that people are eating meat. I mean, it's always been around. But there is more of a boom with people eating more because of access of more vegetables and this and that. So it's more of a current thing too, right? Like, because back in the day, if we went 3,000 years ago, I mean, it was a lot harder to get a lot of fruits and a lot of vegetables, as opposed to having meat there for people that could probably feed, more people, so to speak. So Taoism don't run on a lot of moralistic concerns or moralistic ideals, as you've probably learned from Taoism watching my channel. Taoism being amoral, so just follow what is natural, and nature has its own sense of morality. Yeah, we don't need a man-made morality or even religious morality to tell us how to behave and how to be. I have no concerns if you want to eat this or that. Yeah. My concern on the channel is about deepening your state of consciousness. If that's going to affect the way you eat, then that's all well and good. Yeah. That's well and good, because it can help your spiritual practice too. In Salubrious, what is the philosophy behind the Shaolin Temple? Should a Buddhist monk practice martial arts? Martial arts, especially something like Sunda, which is a totally combat-oriented martial arts like Muay Thai or karate. Yeah, it's interesting with the Shaolin Temple, isn't it, in Salubrious? There's a few different branches within the Shaolin, though, right? There's the martial arts aspect of the Shaolin, and there's also just the Buddhist-oriented aspects of the Shaolin Temple. And so the Shaolin Temple is primarily Buddhist, right? It's Chan Buddhist or Zen, and which incorporates spiritually oriented martial arts, particularly Tai Chi Chuan and Qigong. So, and in most Shaolin temples, they will have the Buddhist abbot and they'll have the martial arts master. So they have 2 masters either or. But the martial arts master obviously has to be schooled in Buddhism as well, right? And has to follow Buddhism. But the Buddhist abbot doesn't have to practice martial arts. They're shanti, they're all good. Is there a contradiction there if it's combat oriented? Maybe, but it depends on. Are they going to use it for combat, or are they using it for just spiritual cultivation and practice? That's what we have to ask. And most of the times, well, from what I've witnessed in the Shaolin, is that they're used mainly just for spiritual cultivation. Yeah, so there's no, there's no, guilt about practicing the combat-oriented martial arts because they're not intending to use it upon anyone. Yeah, even though they do look similar to Muay Thai or karate, but it's still its own flavor, right? It's still its own flavor. Let's have a look. You guys are awesome. Let's keep it going. What do we got? Like I said, guys, if I missed your comment, it's just that there's a lot and it gets overwhelmed. Some questions actually I can't answer, so I just skip over. You don't want to get emotional like old Tashi. What do we got here? Tate, makes sense. Got to remember to tend to my relationships so they keep growing. That resonance you mentioned is what brings me to people and things like this channel. Thank you. Thank you, Tate. Yes, it's true. It's what brings us together, my friend. Brings us all together. Brushstroke. What should I, how should I, what is the meaning of? Exactly. There's some fundamental questions right there, yeah? Luther, sometimes I had deja vu, but after the experience already happened. Yes, that happens a lot. I will remember something I saw and did a week or 2 ago and think I've experienced that before then. It is very strange. It is a strange phenomenon. Ekant, can you explain the difference between Buddhism mind-only school and subjective idealism? Ekant, that's a longer discussion. Difficult for me to explain it on the fly here, yeah? You should Ekant, you should email me that so I can make a video on that. But like with Buddhism mind only, I think most people think of Buddhism as mind only, right? But then it's interesting that mind only school is only one particular part of Buddhism. If we look at in the Theravada schools, there are the schools of Buddha Kamatana, which is old meditation. That's translated as old meditation, which is to do with psychosomatic practices and that. So it's not total. You're not saying that it's totally mind only. There are particular Buddhist mind only schools. Tate, when it comes to life purpose, if we feel resonance with a particular thing and want to do it, how do we do that without being attached and building an ego around it and therefore out of tune with the Tao? You do it with joy, brother, joy. You do it with happiness and enjoyment without seeking results and like future outcomes. Yeah. You do it with a sense of abandonment and joy. It's actually funny because when we have a sense of abandonment, we can actually experience and the joy of things much more purely. Now, so you can have a purpose, but like an abandon a purpose. You know what I mean? Like, because a lot of the times we have a purpose to achieve certain goals, to get something we want from society. But in the end of the day, we we lose out on the fun aspect. We lose out on the joy of the actual experience of what we're doing. So that's how we would accord with the Tao. This is the free and easy wandering mindset of Zhuangzi. Zhuangzi is saying that you don't need to exclude all of reality and all of experience. It's your relation to the experience that's important. So the more spiritual work you do, the more you can have this sense of abandonment and have this sense of free and easy wandering, which allows then you to experience life with a lot of ease. And that meaning you can have fun then, yeah? With whatever. That Vision Quest sounds amazing. And thank you so much for recommending that Master's Monastery. You're an amazing teacher. Thank you. With Shraddha or 108. Don't know what you mean, Shraddha. Cameron, thank you for the great evening, Jason. Thank you. I'll give a hug to a koala bear. No problem. Quanin, yes. Ikigai is by Hector, yes, Garcia and Francis. Yes. Golden Sun, how do you deal with angry people from a Taoist or yoga mindset? I work with angry customers, and I feel I get upset after being cursed. How can Feka with this? I feel guilty. Thank you. Yes, it's very difficult, Golden Sun. It's again, you are practicing right. You are practicing your in spirituality right from a Taoist perspective, but also you don't want to allow people to also take a lot of advantage of you. Sometimes you need to call a spade, yeah? If someone's taking advantage of you. I know that you're dealing with angry customers, and it's probably, from a business perspective, unfortunately, you have to take a back seat and allow them to be angry. Which, we could say in a sense is unfair, right? The customer is always right. And most of the time, a lot of the times, the customer is always wrong. Especially when they're aggressive, they're always wrong. So again, you got to come back more into your own practice, yeah? When these people are going off their nut and this and that, you got to come back into your breathing, into your awareness, and into the sensation of your own emotions. Forget about what they're doing, who they are, yeah? Unless you're going to incur some harm on you, which you can avoid. But if it's just verbal abuse, you can kind of get over that with practicing more awareness and being more present in yourself and trying to dissociate with what's happening. Now, from a Taoist perspective, you have to also deal with the situation in an appropriate manner, yeah? So if they're full of anger and this and that, if you can somehow put out their fire, if that's possible. Sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes people are just pricks for the hell of it. So, and we are not trying here to solve other people's problems. We're more concentrated on our own spiritual development. But if you're in a situation like you're in, sometimes you have to try and put out someone's fire, or at least make them understand in some certain way. And I don't know particularly what it is that you do, but if you're obviously dealing with customers, and it can be difficult. So remember, at the end of the day, it's about your spiritual practice and not about who they are as a person. So. Travis, what qualifies a person as a guru with your immense knowledge and wisdom? Shouldn't you be considered one? I get this a lot, actually. I guess the thing is, what qualifies a lot of people as a guru these days is they just say that they're a guru. Isn't that the truth, huh? Isn't that the truth? So if you just say, there's a lot of self-styled gurus out there, yeah? For myself, even though people consider me a teacher, a guru, I'm a little bit more shy about that sort of title. So I just like to be an ordinary person with you guys and share this knowledge. Yeah. If people want to think about me that way, then that's all well and good. But I would feel uncomfortable calling myself a guru or thinking about myself in that way, because I don't think about myself in that way. Unfortunately, Used to, well, look, because guru means the dispeller of ignorance, right? The dispeller of illusions. So the one who has the knowledge. So and usually to become a guru back in the old days, you used to have to go through a lineage, and you used to have to go through years of practice and sadhana to actually be a guru. You had to be initiated as a guru, right? So, for example, if we look at the Vedantic lineage, going back to Shankara, Gaudapada, even further, and we look at more recent times with Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda, right? Around Ramakrishna, there were a bunch of students and this and that, but Swami Vivekananda was a standout student. He had an aptitude for the knowledge and this and that. Hence, he became, the so-called great guru of the early 19th century. And so late 18th and early 19th century. So, sorry, 19th century and 20th century. What am I saying? So, and then, so he had the knowledge, he had an aptitude for it. And I don't know why I have an aptitude for this knowledge, Travis. I just do. If people want to consider me a teacher, then that's all well and good and this and that. But I don't really know. I just know that there's a lot of self-styled gurus out there. So, thank you, my friend. Guys, bro, beef. Thank you, my friend. Kuan Yin, I will become a patron. Kuan Yin, thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. Much appreciated. Sterling, I don't really know what you're saying. Supposedly it's related to guilt that we feel. Maybe I missed something up above, maybe. CEB. This is an emotional topic for a lot of people these days, isn't it? Any thoughts on the emergency approved jab? I belong to a school who talks a lot about information, yet this was brushed off. You are familiar with this Western UK school. Okay. I don't know what school. You don't need to say. It's interesting because a lot of people are sensitive about this vaccine and whether you vaccine or you don't vaccine. And like, I don't watch a lot of the news, and I trust myself, you know what I mean? And I do what I feel is best for myself on a physical level. And I trust other people to do the same. I think it's a pretty strange day and age where we have, especially because of social media, a lot of people out there telling people what to do and how to think and what they should do, particularly since the pandemic, right? So I think look, in all seriousness, the vaccine hasn't been approved. I mean, it's not approved, what I'm saying. It hasn't been thoroughly tested. So you got to show some sort of discretion there, whether you feel as though that's best for you or not, right? So, and there's a lot of things we could talk about that. But one of the ironic things is that I get on my channel, which it can be annoying, is that people will ask me on the comment section, how come you don't say anything about COVID and the vaccine and this and that? And it's like, I teach Eastern philosophy. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a virus expert. I'm not a vaccine expert. You're asking me. I mean, come on, people. Come on. And I get this a lot. And it's kind of weird, right? Like, because earlier, like when the flu vaccine came out, no one said anything. No one asked me about the flu vaccine. Why is it such a, and it all goes into the hysteria of the world these days. And this is why spiritual practice is very important in this day and age, to distance yourself from all of this noise that everyone is attracted to. So I would say use your own intuition when it comes to the vaccine and the virus, and do what's best for you. Yeah, I'm not going to give any advice on that because I don't know enough about it. I don't watch the news. I know COVID is a thing, but it's not something that actually is important in my life. I'm still living my life, as opposed to watching the news and worrying and fretting about this thing out there. I mean, there's a lot more problems that COVID create than what it actually does, right? Like, I had a friend the other day who talked about a person, his neighbor in Thailand, who hung himself. So there's a lot of socioeconomic problems that happen from this, right? Like, so in some sense, the world eventually just has to get back to normal, and either live with this and stop being so sensitive, or crawl up into the corner of the room and cry until this is over. We've got one or two ways to deal with it. Yeah. So my way is to try and look after all of humanity. And in some sense, the way that a lot of countries are dealing with this is not the best way to deal with it. Yeah. Because we're causing socioeconomic problems. We're causing people to go into depression and suicide and this and that. That probably far outweigh the damage the virus is doing. But we're not allowed to talk about that, right? We can't talk real about this stuff. So, and in hindsight, my channel is not about that. So I don't talk about vaccines and COVID, and I just don't understand why everyone has to have an opinion on it. That's the weirdest thing about it. And I get this a lot, actually, on my channel. A lot of people will be very sensitive especially from America, will be very sensitive about these sorts of topics. And I'm not living in America. I don't know the situation in America. I don't watch the news. So it's not my responsibility. If you are a human being with a decent level of intelligence, then you should know what's best for you. Yeah. I mean, but if you want to know about Eastern spirituality and philosophy, then we can have a discussion. But as I said, Seb, just use some common sense. Do what's best for you. And you should be allowed to talk about it with your friends, but not in a sensitive manner. Yeah, this whole sensitivity thing is too wound up in identity and ego, and it goes to show that what I see in the world these days is that a lot of people have never had any real hardship in their life, and then once the pandemic come along, they're clinging to the wall. Oh, what's happening? They never had anything really bad happen to them. I mean, I always look to my father for this, right? He was homeless from 13. He had to fend for himself from 13. He had a lot more worries than a silly pandemic. And so, like, it just goes to show how soft society in some senses has become, and how too comfortable we've become. Where I look at a lot of actually third world nations and this and that actually have more integrity through this time than first world nations. So. Bruce, namaste. Thank you, my friend. Thank you for being with us. Have a good day. Obo. Hello, my friend. It's been too long. I wondered if, having been born in Australia, if there's anything you could share with us about Aborigines through your Taoist perspective. About Aborigines, they had a very naturalistic culture before colonization. And Australia, because it's so isolated from the rest of the world, was not really touched by a lot of the other world. Like if we look at Asia, Africa, Europe, there was a lot of intermingling of cultures and knowledge systems and this and that. Where the Aboriginals in Australia, they had their own thing and they were down here and just doing their thing. Mind you, there are definitely different tribes from different parts of the land. Like, so if you go to Northern Territory, right to the tip, as opposed to if you go to Byron Bay in New South Wales, they had different cultural norms and different languages and so forth and so on. It's not like they were one sort of unified, because Australia is massive. It's massive, like the land mass, I'm saying. So different tribes had different customs and different beliefs and so forth and so on. But there was a general, sometimes through a lot of the tribes, a lot of the art, and that was very similar. And it's really beautiful art, actually. I don't know if you've seen a lot of the ancient Aboriginal art with the dots and the animals and people and this and that. Really beautiful. But it was a very naturalistic culture. Yeah, very naturalistic culture. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of information out there. A lot of it's been lost in time, unfortunately. Even my Aboriginal friends now, they don't know hardly anything about their heritage, if anything, yeah, because it just, unfortunately, like once colonization happened here, then a lot of it was suppressed and pushed down, and it's only now that some people are trying to, like same in India with the Hindu Renaissance, where people are trying to get back in touch with a lot of that. So, John C., is there any current Western teachers that are good at interpreting Eastern spirituality? I don't really know, John. I don't really, not Eastern spirituality in its totality, maybe like particular aspects of spirituality. So you'll see some Westerners who are Buddhist oriented or Hindu oriented and so forth. Yeah. Tate, do it like I did when I was a child. Have fun, play. Thank you so much for the answer. Thank you, Tate. His3, my first time catching your live stream, enjoying it greatly. How frequent do you do your lives? Every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks. But you can watch the replay on Patreon if you want to become a member. But I'm trying to do it every 2 weeks now because I really enjoy talking to you guys. So, and I hope you're all enjoying it. Give me a thumbs up or a yes if you're enjoying it today. Pacey, I have to leave early, but so glad I was able to catch it. Thank you, Pacey, for being with us. I've actually gone into overtime a little bit here today. And Salubrious, thank you for answering my questions, Jason. Love your podcast, your channel, but I have to go. Thank you, and Salubrious. You're always appreciated on the channel. Thank you. Okay. All right, guys. Actually, over assassin. Yes, Tate, Aboriginal art. Very good, very good. Guys, I'm going to have to go. I'm 48 hours overtime here today. 48 minutes, 48 hours, did I say? Jesus, I've been talking for too long. Usually I only try to keep these at 3 hours, but I've had to, you guys have been so good today. I thought I'd give you a little bit of extra. And I really appreciate all of you, yeah? I hope you had a good time. Art, CB, Miss Zen, Obobo, Kuan Yin, Shraddha Niche, Blue Sunshine, 65, John C. in the house. He was here. Art's in the house with whatever. Thank you for your beautiful questions. Sterling, thank you for your beautiful questions. Insaluberous, man, really love and appreciate all of you, yeah? Thank you for coming, and I'll see you guys on the next live stream. And if you want to become a patron, please head on over to my Patreon page, and you can watch this entire live stream replay, yeah? And so, guys, have a good day, and I'll see you guys in a few weeks. Shanti, shanti, shanti.